Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 161. That's Planet Extra Podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC News, or anytime you like on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook, where you'll also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb. And if you leave a comment under those videos, we're very likely to see it. At least I am. I hope you don't troll the comments, Dave. You wouldn't be happy. You can also tweet us at Pep Chas Dr. Dave, PEPCHASDRDAVE. If you want to contact me privately, ask me on Twitter and I will allow you to direct message or email me. Just kidding. They love you, Dave. They love you a lot more than me. But for now, let's reacquaint ourselves with the man who spent the last 2 weeks walking around not raising the stakes on inconsequential views. I'm talking, of course, about Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. David Smith, looking schmick, Dave.
Thank you. I've just been on ABC News talking about you know what.
Oh, I do.
I am an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, but I do not speak for either of those institutions as much as I feel them in my veins. You know, I was there when the jacaranda fell over.
No.
Or a few minutes after it fell over.
Wow.
Anyway, like that's how Sydney Uni I am. But that doesn't mean that I speak for either of those institutions. In fact, I do not.
He doesn't even speak for the jacaranda.
No. Well, no one speaks for the jacaranda now.
For those following at home, we're recording this at 1:56 p.m. in Sydney on Friday, 31st of May. And, Trump's guilty. I can tell you that. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But Dave, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for Rishi Sunak. Let's have a little trip to planet Britain here. And that's because I feel that giving up is often a far more noble political virtue than people give it credit for. And I would just like to congratulate Rishi on giving up. So he announced that the UK election would be held on the significant date of July 4th. That would leaving the minimum 6-week campaign period. He just decided he was not going to drag out the suffering any longer. I have never seen such unanimous predictions that a government is going to get wiped out, as we're seeing with the Conservatives in the UK now. I've even heard speculation from a Pepper, in fact, that they, there's a chance they might not even get to be the official opposition. Who knows how far it's going to go, but anyway, kudos to Rishi for realising that the writing was on the wall.
It seems like British elections are a bit like state elections in Australia. Like that when a government loses, they really lose.
They really lose. That's true. And I mean, part of that is the nature of the first past the post system. But we'll see. But just on the broader virtue of giving up. It is very important. Now, I'm glad that the civil rights movement didn't give up.
Yes.
I'm glad that the anti-apartheid struggle didn't give up.
Yeah. I'm sure you're glad that your precious Chicago football teams don't give up.
Michigan,
sorry, wherever you're from. I should remember that.
Chicago. But any run-of-the-mill politician in any liberal democracy, feel free to give up when it is obvious that you should give up.
Well, I'm not going to give up 3 minutes into this podcast. But another 2.5 hours to get back to me. I'll tell you what I'm grateful for, Dave.
What are you grateful for?
This is actually easy. Check out the T-shirt.
Yes.
Look at this one. I wore this on today's Planet Ep. This is part of a stash sent to me by Michael as a token of his gratitude for PEP and Planet America.
Great.
As you can see, it's a Libertarian shirt as well, which is very nice.
Yes.
Honestly, there are some doozies in this. He sent me 5 of them.
Wow.
5 shirts. And he's got, one of them was a Thomas Dewey shirt. It's awesome.
Dewey.
Yes, absolutely. And the best part is, not one of them was a double up. With one I've already got. I've got a lot of shirts. I've over 100 shirts.
Yeah.
Not one was a double up. And what that tells me is Michael has watched the show a lot.
Right.
Michael knows exactly what shirts to not get.
Yeah.
So I thank you very much for that, Michael. And it was a really nice note as well. I get sentimental about thank you notes. I keep them in this very messy box because I really love them. And it was a lovely thank you note. So thank you, Michael. I'm exceedingly grateful for your kind gesture. Also, another wonderful gesture from another Pepper. My God, they're just...
Yeah.
Our audience are becoming slightly too good for us, Dave. We don't really deserve them. But Neil, the man behind these mugs, is hoping we can find Courtney Gore's address so he can send her a mug too, as well as a Pep Hero. That's such a great idea.
That is a fantastic idea.
I'm going to try and make this Pep Hero thing idea
Pep
a thing.
Hero, yes.
It's a good idea.
Yep.
So hopefully I'll get to the bottom of her address. But anyway, I'm grateful to all you Peppers. You are too good for us. But I'm loving the paying it forward, so keep on doing that. Very, very, very cool. Correspondence, Dave. VP correspondence. Actually, to be honest, I was going to run a few corrections on Planet America today.
Yeah.
But couldn't because of bloody Trump and his stupid trial, which took up the entire episode. But we made a few mistakes recently. This is one that I was going to put in Planet America.
Okay.
I'll put it here.
Yeah.
It refers to there was a Planet America episode last Wednesday. I cited a New Republic article about Trump hinting that Tim Scott would be his VP.
Right, yes.
And Wagtag writes, don't put any stock in Trump's alleged HBCU/Tim Scott hint. That New Republic article you cited deliberately twisted Trump's truth. I looked it up. He definitely was not committing to a black VP. And even if he was, for my money, Byron Donalds is just as likely as Scott. Wagtag, absolutely right. I didn't think...
They twisted Trump's truth.
They did. I mean, I didn't think you'd need to fact check that kind of thing because I thought it was such an innocuous claim. But as Wagtag said, I got stung. I did.
So the New Republic was trying to make Trump appear more pro-black than he actually was?
Yes. I don't even have their quote here, but I'll tell you the actual Trump post, not chopped up and taken out of context. It was, on behalf of the future Vice President of the United States, who I have not yet chosen, we hereby accept the Fox vice presidential debate, hopefully at Virginia State University, the first historically black college or university to host a debate. Date to be determined. I urge Vice President Kamala Harris to agree to this. Make America great again.
Wow.
That's got nothing. There's no hints there.
No, there's no hints at all.
No, but the New Republic made it out. They were saying like, he had this enigmatic reference to an HBCU university when he's talking about his new vice president.
An enigmatic reference?
Yeah, it wasn't.
He was referring to the university that had agreed to host the debate.
I know. It's anyway.
Jesus.
It was there. They were clickbaiting.
Weird.
Anyway, thank you very much, Wagtag. Well done for doing the fact check that I did not.
Okay.
Plea bargain correspondence, Dave. Long-time listener writes, I work in criminal law and can say the statistic that 98% of federal matters end with a plea bargain is an unhelpful guide as to the equity of the criminal justice system.
Yep.
As a starting point, you'll find that someone charged with a federal crime in Australia has a similarly high rate of guilty pleas, around 91 to 94%. This elevated rate is despite the high quality and high risk appetite of legal aid in Australia. They routinely outperform private defence lawyers, and the absence of plea bargaining in the American sense. In contrast to the US, Australian prosecutors are prohibited from negotiating over sentence length and can only negotiate over the charges, which I did not know. So then presumably there's no concerns about bullying the innocent into accepting plea deals in Australia, which is nice. So why do both countries have high guilty plea rates, particularly when compared to 20 to 30 years ago? Long-time listener writes. One theory is that the quality of evidence and by extension the likelihood of a plea has improved thanks to the widespread use of personal devices. For instance, a phone will betray your location at key times. It'll observe if you spend weeks in the vicinity of a known meth lab, for instance. Your conversation, very helpful for drug supply or fraud-related offences, and your search history, like the murderer who Googled dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. This also cuts the other way. Police are less likely to pursue circumstantial cases which have lower prospects of success and would otherwise be more likely to go to trial. The proliferation of internet-capable devices has also significantly driven the number of prosecutions and convictions for child pornography offences, which are usually federal crimes. I could also go into detail as to the improved investigative techniques and the increase in strict liability offences, but I'm conscious I've already written too much. Well, As it turned out, long-time listener, I read every word you wrote because that was good stuff.
You did not write too much. You wrote the exact amount.
Yeah.
Remember, on PEP, the concept of too much is a very relative one.
Too nerdy for TV. That's what this is.
Yes.
Seriously, top shelf correspondence, long-time listener. Thank you for that. Campaign correspondence. Do you have anything to add to that? I didn't think
No.
No. Campaign correspondence from the Sun Gamer. This is a question which I'm going to be throwing to you.
Yeah.
Question regarding people's misconception of the economy and democratic messaging. How are the Dems supposed to overcome the media's bias towards negative and inflammatory stories and voter apathy / suspicion towards positive economic messaging when they feel like the economy is bad? See Obama 2012, or the worker a few months ago who was a few eps ago, I think, who was annoyed that Biden's visit caused traffic.
I'm going to give what some people might find quite a depressing answer to this, which is I don't think that Democrats have very much control over the message at all.
Yep.
I think that the idea that really clever messaging is what wins elections is something that's been invented entirely by the political messaging industry. It was... I would trace the modern genesis of this to the 1992 Clinton campaign, where James McCarville and George Stephanopoulos presented themselves as these absolute messaging geniuses, you know, rather than the campaign managers of somebody who was running against 12 years of Republican administrations in an election which also had a third-party spoiler who was siphoning votes off the president. So I think that messaging is actually overrated. And
take that, Bill.
Yeah.
Because Bill and I talked about this last week.
Yeah, look, and I mean, as far as the economy goes, as we've said before, the economic pain that people are feeling, despite the very real improvements in the economy, that pain is still very real. And the real problem that Biden has is that it seems that a large segment of the population that is benefiting least from the strong economy are traditional Democratic Party voters who traditional but not completely rusted on. So that's a big problem. I just don't think that there's any messaging magic trick to this.
I think that you make a very reasonable point, especially about 992. But what I would push back on is the idea that it never makes a difference, because I would cite, and in fact, it was cited by Sun Gamer, Obama 2012 as a perfect example where messaging did help. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. That's a great example of where there were extremely negative views about the economy, and they turned around quite quickly. The economy in 2012, by the way, wasn't nearly as good as it is now. Now, obviously, some of this involves just time. Over time thing, that, like, as time passes, it takes a few months for every improvement to filter through. There was a very unfortunate mini bump in inflation 2 months ago, which at the time we said on PEP, this is going to be a problem for Biden. And it may have reset the clock in people's minds. But let's take 2012. An obvious difference between 2012 and now is Obama is a better communicator than Joe Biden.
Yes.
Right? Which is, in my view, the hidden cost of the age issue. Not that Biden's age is a disqualifier, but that he's actually too old to argue effectively. Like, Biden was never as eloquent as Obama, but he used to be effective. Like, he famously in 2012 pantsed Paul Ryan in a debate. And I don't think he's pantsing anyone anywhere, except for maybe himself. Not only is he much less fluent and sharp than he used to be, but he hides more, so he has less opportunities to convince people. But anyway, I read an article about Obama 2012 just yesterday about this, so I'll put it in the show notes and you can see it for yourself. The point they make there is that Obama's convention made a huge difference. They cited the CBS New York Times poll, which before the convention had 39% approving of Obama's handling of the economy, 39 to 54 disapproval. After the convention, those numbers were 45% approval, 47% disapproval, and they stayed that way and only improved from there. And the article singled out Bill Clinton's speech, which in the 2012 convention was all about the economy. It was an hour and a half of the economy. And,
arithmetic.
and it was effective, like anyone who watched it. And it strikes me that maybe what Biden needs
is Bill Clinton.
Not Bill Clinton. Maybe he needs Obama to chuck a Bill Clinton.
Yeah, probably.
And make that his
thing.
No,
I think that is a reasonable call. Yes.
Yeah, like I know Obama doesn't like to campaign to the last second, but yeah, if he could go out there and sell the economy a bit, that might help.
Yeah. Because when I think about sort of messaging being presented as the solution to democratic problems, I always think, because this has been talked about so much around race and policing, and when you just look at average news coverage in the US, you see how little control Democrats actually have over that. There's a particular media narrative that drives engagement with audiences, and Democrats have absolutely no control over that. No matter how many times David Shaw goes to media outlets to complain that the focus is on this issue that is damaging Democrats. Yeah,
that guy turns up in so many articles.
Yeah.
I read about David Shaw. He hasn't any new quotes for months.
No,
and I read about him 4 times a week.
Yeah.
He's just a perennial. Anyway. Yeah. Charlottesville Correspondence, Dave. Melina referred to Charlottesville in passing in her pod.
Yeah.
And Texas Horn writes, "Oh my God, y'all are still pushing the fake Trump supports Nazis at Charlottesville thing. Pull your head out of your butts. Trump said there were good people on both sides of the statue debate. Nazis and Antifa didn't show up until later in the day to fight each other. CNN made the same remark before Trump said it. The female reporter said there were good people discussing their views on statues. Then around 11 a.m., the bad characters came out of the woodwork and immediately started fighting." I don't know about this time thing that he's talking about, but... and Melina only referred to Charlottesville in passing anyway. But I actually did want to just back over this because I think it's worth dealing with. Because
back over is a really unfortunate metaphor in the context of...
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very unfortunate. Well, he didn't back. He didn't reverse.
Yeah.
That's the only thing he didn't do.
Yeah.
But it still gets referred to all the time, especially in Joe Biden attack ads, the very fine people on both sides thing. And that's always been an oversimplification. And so I just wanted to just actually play you guys 2 excerpts. It's about 3 minutes worth. You might not be interested.
Yeah.
You can fast forward if you don't want to. But I want you to hear exactly what Trump did say. And by the way, I don't think what he said was great.
No.
But what he said was not some of the Nazis were very fine people. That is not what he was saying.
Okay.
You can make up your own mind, though.
What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
Let
me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. Fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
All of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee.
Are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side. You can call them the left. You've just called them the left. that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Kill the person. Either high or
Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville
Excuse me.
to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as you, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group. Excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Now, to me, like I said, those were awful answers from Trump. But it's clear to me he's not saying Nazis are fine people. What he's saying is you have two groups of people coming to fight, two groups of people coming to protest. The protesters are the ones he's saying are fine people. The fighters, he's saying, are scum. That's what it sounds like to me. But sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah. We've got to remember, this is as moderate as Trump ever was on these issues. Throughout his presidency, he actually became an avid partisan of the Proud Boys, right? So back then he's saying, oh, very fine people debating on both sides. By the end of his presidency, he's saying, Proud Boys, stand by and stand back. By the end of his presidency, he is openly celebrating the police shooting to death an Antifa person who had been involved in a fatal altercation with the Proud Boys. But by the end of it, when there are all of these street fights happening, at every opportunity he is openly siding with the right on this. I don't see why we're even bothering to go back to 2016 when he was still trying to pretend towards some kind of moderation. By the end of his presidency, he was essentially an honorary Proud Boy.
Yeah, look, I
without the physical courage.
Yes. I'd push back a little bit on the standby one because they were asking him to tell them to stand down.
Yes.
And he said, stand by and stand back.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing
to
do
specifically
that, but
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing.
I felt like he was trying to address what
I
they were
actually
saying.
don't think he's that stupid.
No, I think he is that stupid.
No. There's a world of difference between stand down and stand by.
He seemed to be just vaguing around in the answer. But anyway, that's fine. But I 100% agree with what you just said about the celebrating the murder of an Antifa guy. Yeah, like that is not an inaccurate characterization at all.
I said, what happened? Well, we haven't arrested him 2 days, 3 days went by. We sent in the U.S. Marshals. Took 15 minutes, it was over. 15 minutes, it was over. We got him. They knew who he was. They didn't want to arrest him. And 15 minutes, that ended. Anyway.
And I do agree with your broader point anyway.
Yes.
He has gotten more extreme.
Yeah.
Stats Correspondence. I mentioned Fred last week, which is the site for Federal Reserve economic data, a great site to build your own graphs. I use it literally every week on Planet America. Rip Van Wando says, adding to Fred, Gapminder tools for international data comparison. Have you ever Gapminder?
No, I haven't.
I hadn't either. He says you can choose two axes of data. For example, say life expectancy versus GDP per person, the countries, and then plot/play the change over a time scale as an evolving graphic. Perhaps not as specific, but anyone can pull out and observe some interesting trends with just a few buttons. I tried it out. It's brilliant.
Great.
It is awesome. I strongly recommend it.
Okay.
But just remember, you need to search Gapminder and tools. That's what he said, tools. If you just do Gapminder, it'll send you to a quiz that tests you out on world stats. And by the way, fun quiz. Trivia Chris, you should go to that quiz. There's some good stuff there, man.
Better than Sporkle?
I don't know much about Sporkle.
Okay.
Maybe I should go to Sporkle as well.
I don't want to give you another reason not to sleep.
I literally haven't slept a wink. Bloody Trump. I was going to go to bed at 6 a.m. and then that stupid bloody verdict. Anyway, it's a great quiz if you want to do the quiz. But for making our graphs, Gapminder and tools. And then finally, this is getting to content now, EV tariffs correspondence. Michael, T-shirt, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Asks, I'm interested in your opinions of Biden's China tariffs that were announced, he said last week. He sent this a week ago. So it was 2 weeks ago, with very little coverage. With recent media about auto workers, China and EVs, I would have expected more coverage. To my understanding, China's penetration of the US EV market is minimal today, so the EV-specific tariff is there to protect current US share of their domestic market into the future. But a lot of other tariffs, solar panels, battery components, etc., are on industries where China dominates, and all this will seem to do is to push up the price of the green energy transition. Additionally, I can't find a start date for these tariffs other than 2024, but won't this have an inflationary effect before the November election? Do you have any thoughts about any of that?
None, other than to say that it's because of the lack of coverage, which he points out, that I've got very few thoughts. Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, I did a bit of looking into it, and if you want to add anything off the back of this, you can. Okay. But all I'd say is that I'd start off by pointing out that these two guys, Biden and Trump, both love their tariffs, right? Trump already had tariffs on $300 billion of Chinese imports from his term. And then even though Biden campaigned against them in 2019, he tweeted out, China isn't paying for the tariffs. American farmers and manufacturers are. The American people continue to foot the bill for President Trump's senseless political games. Yep. Good libertarian thoughts there. He then decided to keep the tariffs anyway because he just wanted to twist the knife into my soul. I hate tariffs. Now Trump has called for a 10% across-the-board tariff on all imports, combined with higher tariffs aimed specifically at imports from China, which he said was up to 60% tariffs. Oh, that's steep tariffs. That would cost America about $500 billion a year, according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics. We know who they are. They don't like tariffs either. But $300 billion according to the Tax Foundation, and they're not particularly opposed to tariffs. No. So there you go. Also, at an Ohio rally in April, Trump talking about Chinese cars being made in Mexico said, let me tell you something, in China, we're going to put 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. Now, that's a little different from Biden's policies, because Biden's policies that you're describing, Michael, are a lot more focused than that. For a start, his new tariffs on certain Chinese steel and aluminium products have gone from 0 to 7.5% up to 25%. But also the tariffs that Michael's talking about, he doubled the tariffs on Chinese semiconductors from 25% to 50%. He doubled the tariffs on Chinese solar cells from 25 to 50%. He raised tariffs on the components that make EV batteries from 7.5% to 25%. He quadrupled tariffs on EVs from 25 to 100%. Sounds like he's copying Trump, but not the Mexican ones. Yes. All Chinese ones. And the tariff rates on syringes and needles have gone from 0 to 50%. For respirators and face masks, the tariffs have gone from 0 to 25%. For rubber, medical and surgical gloves, going from 7.5% to 25%. Okay, so there's a few tariffs there. The argument is that these industries are super important and America just can't compete with China, so they need to develop these industries without Chinese competition. That's the argument. Do you buy that argument? No. I don't either. The products are super important. Yeah. The fact of them being manufactured in the United States is not. Well, this is the thing. It's not like China's the only place in the world that makes these products. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's like you can buy gloves elsewhere. Yes, you can. So, anyway, but it's also true
that US car manufacturers are failing badly when it comes to EVs. Like they're just making huge losses. Like Ford says it loses $100,000 on every EV it produces.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's in 2024, they're expected to lose over $5 billion
Awesome.
from their EVs. Now, obviously, Tesla's doing better, but they make more high market cars. The Chinese make sort of the cheaper cars, right? And the thing is that protecting, like the reason why they're losing all that money is not because of China.
No.
Because like Michael says, China isn't importing cars anyway.
Yeah.
Like there's only one importer, Polestar, and they don't make many. Like even Biden's own estimate is that all of these tariffs combined are going to affect $18 billion of imports.
That's not very much.
No, it's not. So, like, it's not going to make much difference. The US EV car manufacturers are still going to struggle, even without China there. But I think it's kind of doubling down on a failing strategy, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you fix the problem then? Because that's my question, because obviously you want to aid the green transition, which is the point that Michael's making. I'd suggest at the very least they should use Chinese components, the cheap Chinese components, to make their cars cheaper.
Yeah.
Because if you're putting 25% tariffs on the components, that's filtering through to the cars.
Yes.
Like it's so it's if you can make the American EV, so car industry, efficient with its electric cars, then you can work on the batteries and the other components. At the next stage, I would have thought. But you just want to get some economies of scale happening, because right now, not enough people are buying electric in America to get economies of scale.
Yes.
So it makes it harder for the car companies to make money. Anyway. Also, of course, is ignoring the environmental element, which is obviously if they let the market decide, in this case, there'd be significantly fewer emissions, which would be nice. It's not inflationary, Michael, because there's only $18 billion of imports. So, and some of them don't start until 2026. So this is not going to be inflationary. And also, I should say, Trump pledged to put a 200% tariff on any cars China make very soon after that. So let's see how many thousands of percents the tariffs are at. Now, you get to a point where the tariffs are so high that they're not going to sell any of them. So there's no point. You might as well just say
that's his express aim.
Yeah, you might as well just say
you're not going to be able to
%.
sell those cars.
Yeah. Anyway, it just feels like a lack of imagination to me, basically. All right. I do acknowledge, though, to be fair, that Biden does have one hand tied behind his back, because Republicans don't want to help him. Trump will undo whatever he does.
Yeah.
So it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy being Biden and trying to be green, but whatever.
Yeah.
Dave, save us. Talk about the Libertarian Conference.
Oh, yes. So that happened over the weekend, and it's possibly a more significant event than you might think. Okay, I will get into that. But first
Not
of all,
even I think it's significant. I'm a libertarian.
First of all, let's just talk a bit about libertarianism.
Please.
So,
about time.
Libertarianism in the United States has a lot of different strands of thought in it and a lot of different sources.
Does it ever?
The best book that I know about this, which I have previously put in the reading list, is Brian Doherty's Radicals for Capitalism. So this is written by a libertarian. It's from a sympathetic
it's already there.
Yeah. It was in the book list like 4 years ago.
Okay, right.
So, and he argues that there are all of these different strands in American thought that you can trace back to people like Laura Ingalls Wilder, the author of Little House on the Prairie, obviously people like Ayn Rand, as well as the Austrian economists like Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek. That's before you ever get to any institutionalized form of libertarianism.
Yeah.
The point is that by the time the Libertarian Party came along, and right from the beginning, it was very, very heavily backed by the Koch brothers. By the time that came along, libertarianism was already such a big and fragmented thing that the Libertarian Party was never the sole voice of libertarianism in the United States. In fact, there are plenty of libertarians who despise the Libertarian Party and would never vote for it. For those who do get on board with the Libertarian Party, there are always major disputes within the Libertarian Party, and so Libertarian conventions tend to be a fairly fractious affair. In terms of the way that it looks at the moment, the most significant Libertarian figure of, I'd say, the last 40 years was Ron Paul, or is Ron Paul. So Ron Paul is a Republican serving in Congress from Texas. Also, though, as he likes to point out, a member of the Libertarian Party since 1987. Since 1987, he has paid his membership dues in gold coins.
That's great.
He was never actually the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, but I think he was in the running once, but I think he lost to Russell Means. So Russell Means is the sovereign leader of the of one branch of the Lakota people in the Dakotas. He had this great plan to completely remake North Dakota's economy with wind farms. Anyway, Ron Paul, though, because of his very high profile status in American politics, because of the fact that he was a couple of times a Republican presidential candidate who in early races did very well, because he has this crossover appeal. Okay, and I've seen this crossover appeal in action. In 2008, he was the only presidential candidate of any party who visited Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I went along to his rally, and the crowd that was there, it was not just a libertarian crowd. There were definite libertarian elements into it. But you have to remember that Ron Paul at this point was probably the most anti-war candidate on either party. And people who thought, Obama was promising to get out of Iraq, but a lot of people thought that the Democrats were too implicated in the Iraq war, and that Ron Paul was just the genuine real anti-war candidate. When you add that to his advocacy for legalized marijuana, you've got someone who is very popular with college students in 2008. In that speech also, he avoided suggesting that we should bomb the banking system back to the 18th century, which is not so popular with, it's not really that well understood by many people, that position. But yeah, he avoided that. But at one point, I remember there was a bit of a ruckus in one corner of the crowd. There was a few hundred, or maybe around 1,000 people in the Diag at Michigan. There's a bit of a ruckus, and I sort of heard this cheering and saw flames. And it was these anarchists burning dollar bills. And Ron Paul made some comment about, these anarchists always keep turning up. Yeah, good to see you here. So Ron Paul had this crossover appeal that no other libertarian has ever had. But his anti-war, pro-drug kind of cheerful persona might blind you to the fact that culturally he is very, very right-wing. And in the early 90s, his newsletter was openly racist. Now, he's since claimed that he wasn't actually authoring those openly racist articles, but others have claimed that, no, back in the early 90s, people on the libertarian right thought that white supremacy was basically the future. I'm not taking a position on that, but
they might not have been wrong.
Yeah.
Sadly,
yeah. But there certainly were libertarian figures who more than flirted with open racism at that point. But anyway, so Ron Paul represents this very culturally conservative version of libertarianism.
Yes.
And there are people in the Libertarian Party who have argued that that's what the Libertarian Party should be more oriented around. The Libertarian Party has generally always been a lot more socially liberal, has given equal stress to socially liberal causes as it gives to economically libertarian causes. So pro-gay, a lot of times pro-immigration. I remember talking to somebody from the Institute for Humane Studies who would have been very much on that side of it. I remember him saying, like, the best three things that any government could do are legalize drugs, end all tariffs, and open the borders. That's the. I wouldn't call it left libertarianism, but that's like the left of right libertarianism. Yeah.
I was just going to make the point that it's been, especially since the Tea Party.
Yes.
It's been really important for the libertarians to embrace the social left, because if they didn't, they'd just be Republicans.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But So this is, it's far more complex than that, but this you could see as the major fault line. Now, that sort of left of the right libertarianism has dominated nominations for a long time. And the most successful libertarian candidate in history is your boy, Gary Johnson, who got more than 3% of the vote back in 2016. Yep. He was the most, I'd say, mainstream politician that ever got the libertarian.
Wow, he was a Republican.
He was a Republican governor of New Mexico. Yeah. The 2020 candidate Joe Jorgensen is on that side of the Libertarian Party as well. But starting from 2018, there was this real revolt against that, led by something called the Mises Caucus, named after Ludwig von Mises, who were like, no, we need to orient ourselves around Ron Paul-style libertarianism. Their biggest villain is Bill Weld. They hate Bill Weld, who was, by the way, the only Republican who ran against Donald, the only serious Republican who ran against Donald Trump in 2020. So you can see there's a lot of connections between the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party. In 2022, the Libertarians actually succeeded in doing something that they hadn't been able. The Mises Caucus, Mises, I don't know how to pronounce it, succeeded in actually getting someone into the chair of the Libertarian National Convention. So the current chair, I think her name is Amelia McArdle. Angela McArdle. Yeah. Sorry, Angela McArdle. She's from the Mises Caucus. The Libertarian Convention reflects this kind of extreme fractiousness. Yeah. Now, I don't know if the Mises... I don't know how much the Mises Caucus had to do with the Trump supporters who were there, but there was a definite contingent of Trump supporters at the Libertarian Caucus. I think a lot of libertarians said that they weren't even libertarians at all. So there was, before Trump's speech, apparently all of these libertarians came in, went to the front of the room into seats that were reserved for libertarian delegates and then wouldn't move. And Angela McArdle eventually just had to tell them, you've got to get out of their seats. These are for actual Libertarian Party delegates who have paid to be here. One of the candidates who was in the running for the Libertarian nomination was posting big decals all over this hotel, which he'd pay for, saying, deny Trump and Biden victory on election night. So he had this whole strategy around making sure that neither of them got to 270 seats. Someone claiming to be from the Libertarian Party apparently came up to him and demanded that he remove these decals. This guy refused and then later found out that the guy who had come up to him demanding the removal of the decals in fact worked for the Trump campaign. Oh. Yes. So there was a bit of an attempt to infiltrate it by the Trump campaign. We'll come back to Kennedy. Kennedy actually spoke first, but we'll deal with Trump first. So Trump spoke on Saturday. Trump was not officially seeking the nomination because he is the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, but it was clear he really wanted the Libertarian nomination as well.
He asked them to nominate him.
He did
several times.
Yes,
five times.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. As I say, he wasn't officially seeking. He claimed he wasn't officially seeking the nomination, but he did ask them to nominate him. I'm
calling bullshit on that because he said that he didn't. Hang on. The reason I didn't file paperwork for Libertarian nomination, which I would have absolutely gotten if I wanted it, as everyone could tell by the enthusiasm in the crowd last night. Sometimes you wonder if he's being sarcastic when he does that. Was the fact that as the Republican nominee, I'm not allowed to have the nomination of another party.
Not true.
I was going to say, he was the nominee for the Conservative Party in 2016 and 2020.
If you actually have a look at state ballots in presidential elections, like in New York, you'll see the Democratic candidate is actually like the nominee of 4 different parties.
Yeah, Workers' Party.
Yes, yeah. So, there's I don't know if it's the case in every state, but there are at least plenty of states where you can be the nominee of multiple parties.
Yeah, so
that is bullshit. But yes, he did ask them for the nomination,
and they responded with hearty boos.
They did.
A great libertarian who may very well be in the room right now, I believe, but he's a great libertarian, D. Roy Murdoch, who I've become friends with through his writings in the American Spectator and numerous other places,
wrote an article yesterday in which he mentions just some of the things that make me a libertarian without even trying to be one. That's nice. D-Roy wrote, Donald J. Trump will address the Libertarian Party and its National Convention on Saturday. The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Thank you, D-Roy. Thank you. No, only do that if you want to win. If you want to lose, don't do that. Keep getting your 3% every 4 years.
I like the way he's asking them to nominate him. They boo him, and then he just immediately just turns and just starts acting like a little bitch. just spits the dummy. The guy is standing in front of a big sign that says "Become ungovernable."
Yeah.
And he thinks that they want to win.
These people want to lose.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that sick of a burn because he said they get 3% every 4 years. No, they don't. They get like 1% every 4 years. They got 3% once.
Yeah, they dream of 3% every 4 years.
Yeah.
I'll just read you one more tweet on this note, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
Which was, this is from a rando, but I just loved it.
Yeah.
Telling the libertarians what they should do is an interesting move. I'm not sure anyone explained to him what a libertarian is. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, apparently he got one write-in vote, but...
Oh, no, he got 6.
6 write-in
He got
votes.
6 write-in votes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I have a list, I have a full list of the one write-in votes.
I mean, libertarianism, it is diverse enough that there would actually be people who could bring themselves to vote for Trump, but there wouldn't be many of it. When you combine the tariffs, the plans for massive concentration of executive power, which is not something that libertarians like. And even though, so some would like aspects of his foreign policy, but at the same time, Trump is really into the military-industrial complex and a couple of times came pretty close to war with Iran. They're not voting for Trump. Well, most of them are not voting for Trump.
Yeah, like you say, he's an authoritarian.
He's absolutely an authoritarian figure. Now, certainly some libertarians are also authoritarians.
They're not very good libertarians.
Someone like Corey Robin would argue it's really just about the level of authoritarianism you're looking at, that libertarians are all in favour of authoritarianism in the workplace and the family, for example.
That's true. That's fair.
Yeah. But not at the level of executive government. They certainly don't want that. So Trump was on a bit of a hiding to nothing there. The reason why I say, though, that this convention is actually significant.
Yeah, tell me.
No, it's more because of RFK.
Okay.
So Kennedy actually did seek the nomination.
He did.
And as we've said before, the main benefit for Kennedy in this nomination would be that he actually gets on the ballot in every state. He still is only on the ballot in 5 states. There is still no guarantee that he is actually getting on the ballot even in a majority of states. For somebody who is making so many waves, for somebody who is potentially the biggest third-party candidate since Ross Perot, or even bigger than Ross Perot, for somebody who is issuing challenges to Biden and, paying for polling showing that he's supposedly a better candidate than Biden, he's just got this mystifying inability to actually get himself on ballots.
Yeah, his organisation is terrible.
Yeah. And, choosing a wealthy VP doesn't seem to be helping him at all. So this could have been a major boost to him. But as we've just discussed before, even though he says some things that libertarians would like, very against vaccine mandates, he's sort of reinvented himself as very pro-gun. He cannot get away from environmental regulation as one of the fundamental cornerstones of who he is. And they do not like that at all. So he got 19 votes.
That's right.
2%.
2%.
19 votes in the first round. And it's just worth keeping in mind in the future, because I remember a few months ago the discourse was, oh, well, Robert F. Kennedy could just get the Libertarian nomination. Yeah, there was kind of this assumption that it was just his for the taking.
Yeah. I don't think it's his for the
if he
taking.
wanted it, because they're a bunch of crackpots too. But no, the Libertarians are a very unruly, ungovernable, fractious mob who have their own convention.
I'd actually argue that RFK had a much bigger failure than Trump.
Yes, much bigger.
Because he was trying his best.
He was really trying.
He wasn't abusing them.
Yeah, like Trump doesn't have much to gain or to lose from that. Apart from that was one of the few situations where he's ever in front of a crowd where he's been booed. So that kind of felt good, especially given the week he had afterwards.
Yeah, and RFK, he got 19 votes, like you said. He was only just ahead of a dude called Toad, who got 16 votes.
Single name.
And then there was the write-ins after that. You know?
Toad, yeah.
And the most embarrassing thing of all, I mean, you might be about to mention this, was that Nicole Shanahan was scheduled to speak the day after.
Yes, she was.
But then after that vote, she just suddenly had another appointment. She just couldn't speak anymore for unknown reasons.
Yeah.
So it's just a kind of a humiliation.
Yes,
really.
yeah. So the reason why that convention is actually significant is, first of all, that it actually potentially downplays the Kennedy factor in the election.
Okay, that's important.
The second thing is there actually will be a Libertarian candidate who will probably get 1% of the vote.
Yes.
Which can be significant. One of the reasons why Trump put himself through this was the knowledge of what happened in Arizona last time. Jorgensen got 50,000 votes there in a state that Trump lost by 10,000. Yeah. He's going to have to contend with that again. So we should talk about the actual Libertarian contest then.
We should.
Which is something that has been very disappointingly overlooked by the media.
Go for it, Dave.
So this was won by Chase Oliver, who's very much with that left of the right that I've described in the Libertarian Party, describes himself as armed and gay. Yep. He's a 38-year-old, pretty dedicated Libertarian Party activist. For as long as I've been following this, which is about 5 months, he's always been cited as the potential leader.
Yep.
Who he defeated in the end was none of the above. That's how fractured. That was the second place vote getter in the final round of voting.
Can you explain how that works?
Was none of the above, because so many libertarians they take seriously the become ungovernable thing. That refers to their own party as well. A lot of them just didn't want any of the candidates. McArdle had to plead with them. We have to nominate someone. If we don't nominate someone, we don't have a nominee on the ballot. We can't put, none of the above on the ballot.
So what you're saying is in the second last round,
yes,
none of the above got more than the second place.
Yes,
right. Okay,
that's right. Okay. Yes, yeah. So second place getter was the delightfully named Michael Rechtenwald.
Yes.
Now, Michael Rechtenwald is an academic at NYU who in 2016 began tweeting under the handle anti-PC NYU prof before he was outed by the student newspaper. And he's best known for having invited Milo Yiannopoulos to a speaking event, which, I love the sort of grand intellectual pretensions around a lot of these figures. Like, I'm the anti-PC NYU prof, and I'm going to demonstrate my intellectual credentials by inviting this troll who is best known for his paean to pedophilia to speak in front of an NYU audience.
Sounds to me like you're the PC prof, Dr. Dave. If you don't like Milo stylings. Oh, God.
And this is 3 years after Milo ceased to be relevant.
Wow. 2016
is widely recognised for scholars of Milo as the final year of Milo relevance.
Very much so.
Right, because it was then after that he did that unfortunate radio interview. He fell so badly after that he was in Australia doing a tour.
Yeah,
there were pictures of him being kissed on the cheek by Mark Latham and hanging out with Pauline Hanson. And I remember the following year, 2018, there's a great clip of him on YouTube on a boat for some reason, surrounded by Proud Boys, saying that the previous year had been the lowest year of his life. He said he said something like, you could tell when you're at a real low by who you're hanging out with at that point. He's talking about Mark Latham and Pauline Hanson.
That's great.
Yeah, so, but the thing is, when he said that was the lowest year of his life, like, no, it wasn't. Because then he came back to Australia after that. He was so desperate for publicity, he came back to Australia to insult the Opera House or something like that. And then he was ignored. So, yeah, but if you're inviting Milo along to speak in 2019, it shows something of a severe lack of imagination.
Sure.
Anyway, so Michael Rectenwald, who is part of the Mises Caucus, was the, not exactly the runner-up because none of the above was was runner-up, but he was the second runner-up. So for the time being, for the Libertarian Party watchers, that sort of Gary Johnson left still holds sway over the Mises Right, despite the fact that Mises Right has the current chairperson.
Yeah, I was going to say that on Chase Oliver, I mean, you've definitely explained that well.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of significance here as well with Chase Oliver because I'll just play you a little bit of him talking about immigration, for instance.
First, if you ask people who live here or know the community here, people who are coming to this country just want to work for the most part. They are not seeking to take our welfare. And in fact, you're 3 times more likely to go into a welfare program as a native-born citizen than as a migrant. And so the truth is a lot of these folks are actually working. They use a fake social security number because they don't have documentation, so they pay into the system, and they never get those benefits back. And so when we're talking about immigration here, we need to understand this, that these people are just trying to seek a better life. And when you see fences like this, these kinds of things belong more in, dystopian, totalitarian states like East Germany that would separate East and West Berlin. These walls prevent commerce. These walls prevent peaceful people from being able to move freely about and spend their money or their labor or their time either in Mexico or here in the United States.
He just sounds like a left-wing Democrat.
Yeah.
And it's not just on immigration either. He's an ex-Democrat. He left the Democratic Party under Obama because he thought Obama was too militaristic. He's very pro-diversity.
Yeah.
He's gay himself.
Yes, yeah.
And he's like, for all intents and purposes, he's almost on the left side of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And it's And so the reason I think that's important to note, he's going to take votes off Biden.
That I was also thinking that, yes. Yeah. That is a potential problem for Biden.
Totally.
He could
because you know what else he is? Really, really, really anti-Gaza war.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
He's the one. Remember, we were talking about Cornel West maybe being the one. This guy is going to be the one who takes the votes from the kids who don't like Gaza.
If he can actually get some publicity for it, because at the moment he's pretty much unknown.
Yeah.
But if he does get publicity for it, then he could be a potential problem for Biden. Yes. Although at the same time, any libertarian is still a potential problem for Trump. Now that's just because of the party label.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Rather than the specific candidate. So, what else was I going to say about this?
While you think what you're going to say, well, you just think what you're going to say while I just read off some of the other write-in votes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Before I get to that,
yes.
I do just want to point out about the complexity of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ron Paul was someone who advocated for drug legalization, but it was also very clear that he never would have used drugs himself and would have been pissed off if any member of his family had. The Mises Caucus, even though they're all like, let's get behind Ron Paul, they're not as culturally right-wing as him because the times have frankly moved on a little bit. So Michael Rectenwald admitted that he actually dropped a cannabis gum, using the correct term, a cannabis gummy into his mouth before he responded to Trump's speech. Yes. Which
what effect did that have?
I don't know. I haven't seen his response to Trump's speech because I'm not that into the Libertarian Convention.
Well, it must have been striking enough for him to get beaten by none of the above because they voted soon after that.
Yes.
So, yes.
Afro Man was also a candidate.
I was going to say, I've got my list here of the write-in votes. We've got Trump on 6. We've got Stormy Daniels on 1. We've got Sean Ono Lennon on 1.
Yeah, I was puzzled by that one, yeah.
We've got Afro Man on 1.
Yeah.
We've got Denali the cat on 1. That's that cat mare from a few years back.
Yeah.
And Ben Dover got 1.
Oh!
So quality
That's
humour
some
there.
great. Yeah, Courtney Love got one as well in the later rounds.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's nice. There you go. I don't have anything else to say. Do you have anything else to say about them?
No. Other than, obviously, I'm just very sad that that's the last we'll see of the Libertarian Convention for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Oh, well, we enjoy it while it lasted.
Yep.
Stats Nugget. Woo! I'm going to talk about plastic recycling quickly. In 2014, California banned single-use plastic bags. According to a report by consumer advocacy group CALPIRG.
Yep.
CalPIRG. In 2014, that year, they banned them. Mm-hmm. They had 157,000 tons of plastic bag waste discarded in California. Mm-hmm. In 2022, there were 231,000 tons of plastic bag waste discarded in California. That's a 47% jump, but even accounting for the greater population, it went from 4.08 tons per 1,000 people in 2014 to 5.89 tons per 1,000 people in 2022. Why is that? I bet you can guess. The law allowed grocery stores and large retailers to sell, you know the ones, the thicker, heavier weight plastic bags to customers for a dime. Those bags were 20% recyclable, but they're usually not recycled. People just buy them and then throw them away. The CalPIRG state director said, basically what happened is that plastic bag companies invented these thicker plastic bags that technically meet that definition of reusable, but they're clearly not being reused and don't look like reusable bags and which just circumvent the law's intent. So what they do about it? They're trying to ban those thicker bags now as well.
Right, yep.
But the main thing they've done, and Craig Grewcastle, if you're listening to this, cover your ears, is they decided the whole plastic bagging is stupid and they stopped focusing on it.
Oh,
and now
no.
they're focusing on all plastics, which makes more sense. Plastic bags aren't special. All plastics. And in 2018, the EPA estimated that 8.7% of all plastics are actually recycled. So in 2022, California passed a law which required that by 2028, at least 30% of plastic items sold, distributed or imported must be recyclable. By 2032, that number is 65%. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how the best laid plans can sometimes backfire.
I remember 10 years ago at the Museum of Alaska, would have been almost 10 years ago to this day, I saw this very depressing exhibition of art made of plastic bags that had washed up on the shores of Alaska.
Sounds poignant.
It was very poignant, but not as poignant as, because earthquakes are a big problem in Alaska. And there was this whole section on earthquakes, including instructions on how to prepare your house for an earthquake. And they had like the picture of someone who'd prepared their house properly, and because of that, nothing fell down. But then picture of the same guy who hadn't prepared his house properly. Show this guy sort of sitting on the floor in a daze, surrounded by books that had fallen off his shelf, and they were all Ayn Rand books.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's subtle. It's a real libertarian theme today.
Yeah.
Dave, let's talk about the should have been leader of the Libertarian Party, Donald Trump, and his trial. Okay, shall I start?
I feel we've really broken new ground by not leading with this today. This is the only place where the Libertarian Convention is going to be the lead story, rather than Trump being the first president in history to be convicted of a crime.
I wanted to start with the important thing, which is the Libertarian Convention. That makes sense. Okay, I'll start off on this one, and then you can jump in. All right. I'm not going to go too deep on this. The next time we talk, I'll say a lot more.
Okay.
This obviously only broke overnight.
Yes.
So I haven't done my reading.
Yep.
I don't think I even can read at the moment. I'm very tired. Okay, first of all, the first thing we should reiterate, sentencing on July 11, he's not going to go to jail. Okay, we should, every time we talk about this, we should reiterate that.
Yep.
People are already talking about jail time. Norm Eisen recently analysed dozens of cases brought by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, in which falsifying business records was the most serious charge. 1 in 10 of those cases resulted in a sentence of incarceration.
Yeah.
That's when they're not the president.
Yes. Yeah.
So, or the ex-president. And then obviously he's got Secret Service issues. And also he's a first-time offender. He's 77.
Yeah.
And Machan specifically said during the trial that he saw imprisonment as truly a last resort for me when he's talking about the gag order and Trump.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not going to happen. Even though there was a freak out earlier in the week about the Secret Service meeting with local jail officials. Yeah, they're just doing their job, just assessing options. Anyway, what I want to do now is I did spend a long time overnight going through the jury instructions because they're so important.
Yes.
And they're going to be so important to the appeal, which is the inevitable appeal. So I'm going to go through these now with lots of quotes.
Okay.
And that's going to be my main contribution to this.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the instructions said, under our law, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the first degree when with intent to defraud that includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, that person makes or causes a false entry in the business records of an enterprise. Fine. Okay, so there's 3 major questions here. First of all, did the payments happen? Obviously, Trump slept with Stormy Daniels. Obviously, he paid her off. Obviously, he knew the hush money payments were being made.
Yes.
That's all kind of obvious.
Yep.
He knew that Michael Cohen was being repaid for that. He admitted that publicly.
Yep.
He knew that. So I think there's zero doubt on any of those questions.
Zero.
Okay. The next step is, did he intentionally falsify the records? That's the next step. Now, it's pretty clear that Cohen's payments were incorrectly marked as legal retainer payments. Trump definitely knew that Cohen was being repaid for the hush money.
Yep.
As I said, he admitted it. But as far as I can see, there's no documentary evidence that Trump knew how the expenses were recorded. And this is the important bit, recording them the way they were recorded was illegal.
Yes.
He has to know that to have intent.
Yep.
That's a critical bit to prove. Now, Cohen testified that was the case.
Yes.
If you believe Cohen, they've made that part of the case.
Yep.
If you don't believe Cohen, then it's a leap of faith. That's the gap, at least so far.
Yes.
All right. So that was a critical question there. And the way Blanche put it is there's no way you can find that President Trump knew about this payment at the time it was made without believing the words of Michael Cohen. Fine. All right. And we should just note that Trump did sign 9 of the 11 checks. So he at least knew what the payments were, but did he know how they were declared? That's a good question. And then 3, they need to show an intent to commit another crime. Quote, the people allege that the other crime a defendant intended to commit, aid, or conceal is a violation of New York election law section 17152. Remember I said that back on day 1 of the trial.
Yep.
They said that real early. What's 17152? I'm going to read to you again. Section 17152 of the New York election law provides that any 2 or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means and which conspiracy is acted upon by 1 or more of the parties thereto shall be guilty of conspiracy to promote or prevent an election. Okay, so they've got to be trying to basically interfere with the election.
Yep.
By unlawful means.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
Yep.
And it's a conspiracy acted upon by 1 or more of the parties. What that means is the unlawful means don't need to be done by Trump. They can be done by some other party to the agreement, like Michael Cohen.
Yes, yeah.
So what you should be asking yourself with what I'm about to go through is, was when Michael Cohen did these things, were they unlawful?
Yep.
Because Trump didn't do a lot of these things. Okay? All right, and this is where we get to a lot of confusion because I'll quote Marco Rubio from Twitter. Judge in Trump case in New York City just told jury they don't have to unanimously agree on which crime was committed as long as they all at least pick one. And that amongst the crimes they can pick from are ones Trump wasn't even charged with. This is exactly the kind of sham trial used against political opponents of the regime in the old Soviet Union. Okay, correction. They did say which crime was committed.
Yeah.
It was Section 17152.
Yes.
That's the crime being committed.
Yes.
All right. What we didn't know were the unlawful means being pursued as part of that crime.
Yes.
That's what we didn't know. And let's get into the unlawful means. There's a quote again from the judge. Any two or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means. That's Section 17152. And which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties thereto shall be guilty of conspiracy to promote or prevent an election. Okay, right. So let's get into the unlawful means. They don't have to be unanimous on this. Quote, although you must conclude unanimously that the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, that's the crime.
Yeah.
You need not be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. So they need to be unanimous about the crime, but not one of the elements of the crime.
Right.
Okay? In determining whether the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, you may consider the following. He lists 3. Violations of the Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA. 2, the falsification of other business records. Or 3, violation of tax laws. I'll go through them quickly. FECA, he says, under the Federal Election Campaign Act, it is unlawful for an individual to willfully make a contribution to any candidate with respect to any election for federal office, including the office of President of the United States, which exceeds a certain limit. So, the jury instructions there were shouting loud and clear for them to focus on the size of the contribution, that which exceeds a certain limit bit.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Usually, when you're talking election law, they're focusing on the intent. Because most election law, you need to know that you are willing, you need to knowingly and willfully be violating the election law. So you need to know.
Dinesh D'Souza style.
Exactly. So you need to know that you're violating election law. Judge Machan just brushed past that. He didn't mention it at all. He just mentioned that that you need to willfully make a payment, not willfully break the election law. Right. Which means all Trump or Cohen need to know is that they're making a hush money. They're making a payment that's a campaign expense that's more than the maximum campaign expense. Or campaign donation. They both knew that they were paying $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. So they've made the case that Machan set for them.
Yes, yeah.
Right? As for the campaign expenses versus personal expenses thing, the Melania question. Machan had the final word on this.
What did he say?
If the payment would have been made, even in the absence of the candidacy, the payment should not be treated as a contribution. So, simple question. Would he have had the expense without the campaign? That's all you need to ask. In this case, the answer is clearly no. He wouldn't have, which means it's a campaign expense.
Yes.
And by the way, the reason I say no is because Trump was clearly trying to put off the payment. So he wouldn't have paid it if there wasn't an election. Okay, that's the first unlawful means. The second one is falsification of other business records. Machan says, under New York law, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the second degree when with intent to defraud, he or she makes or causes a false entry in the business records of an enterprise. Then Machan directed them to focus on Cohen's bank records and the invoices associated with his fake company he made up for these payments. So he clearly falsified heaps of records with an intent to defraud. So that sounds like it's made, but there's a key question here. Was the falsifying of records for the fake company to help promote Trump's election? Because that is what Section 17152 is about. I'd say it was to help Cohen cover his ass, not to help Trump win the election. So I'd say that's probably no, but you know, that's the intent question that Merchant put to the jury. And it's a more basic question than it could have been. Tax fraud, finally. Under New York State and New York City law, it's unlawful to knowingly supply or submit materially false or fraudulent information in connection with any tax return. And he said the same for the federals, for the federal level. Cohen said he was getting legal expenses when he wasn't. So he was lying on his tax forms.
Yeah.
That's it. They've made the case.
There you go.
It's as simple as that. The strange part is, by lying on his tax forms, he paid more tax. So it's a little bit of a mindfuck.
It's that business sense.
Yeah, it's
that legendary business acumen. Yeah.
But Mashan said explicitly, under these federal, state, and local laws, such conduct is unlawful, even if it doesn't result in underpayment of taxes. So there you go. So that's fine. But once again, were these tax lies to help promote Trump's election? Mm-hmm. I'd say they're probably incidental to that, but whatever. That's a question for the jury. So basically, my take is, there are some questions in those, but the FECA, the federal election law, seems just a slam dunk.
Yes, yeah.
The way Mashan worded it.
Yes.
So to me, the only question is going to intent right at the beginning.
Yep.
Did Trump know that those payments were filed fraudulently?
Yes. Yep.
That's the question.
Yep.
They obviously believed Michael Cohen.
Yep.
And so therefore they said he's guilty. So that's my take on the jury instructions. Now, there's all kinds of places where those instructions were really simplified.
Yeah, yeah.
And there may be an appeal saying that they were too simplified or that they were simplified in the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's where we're at.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So, a couple of things.
Yes.
One is that we have to keep in mind the jurors saw and heard a lot more than we did.
Yes.
Than any commentator did, apart from those who were actually in the courtroom. And there weren't that many of them in the courtroom.
Like Jonathan Turley. You're saying Jonathan Turley's right. That's what you're saying.
Well, what I'm saying is, by the end of this, especially given the responsibility that they had to follow everything closely, the jurors would have been the biggest experts on this case.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I completely respect their decision.
Yes.
They, and they, given how the deliberation went, they clearly took it very seriously. Was I right in saying there were actually two lawyers on the jury?
There were two lawyers, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if there had been gaping legal holes in it, I would have thought that one of them probably would have, would have picked it up. Even though, I mean, we've been skeptical for months about the case that the prosecution was making because it was so complicated and so novel. There were so many long bows to draw. They clearly made it to the satisfaction of the jury. We never would have been able to get, from before the case began, we never would have really been able to get a complete picture of what the prosecution was doing. Even while the trial was going on, we wouldn't have been able to get a complete picture of what the prosecution was doing. Whereas the jury actually had that.
Yeah, although I would emphasise that the proper test of all those legal questions are going to be the appeal.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's just the first thing that I would say about that.
Okay.
Is that, I completely, I was asked in a media interview this morning, do you think this was the right result? It's like, I completely defer to the jury on that. The jury was convinced by the prosecution. But getting back to that point that we often made about how complicated this case was and how some of the things that the prosecution had to do actually appeared pretty hard. That point that about Trump actually knowing the way that these records were falsified. There was an op-ed in the New York Times that went up a couple of hours after the verdict by Renato Mariotti, who's a defense lawyer, who said that Trump's defense blew it, that this actually should have been very winnable.
I'm shocked.
By the defense. And just to, a few quotes from this, which back up some of the points you're making. The only direct evidence of Trump's knowledge was the testimony of Michael Cohen, who has pleaded guilty to lying to Congress and charges of bank fraud, tax evasion and campaign finance violation, who hates Trump and makes money off his public commentary on Mr. Trump's legal woes. You don't need to be a lawyer to see how this could be a powerful legal defense. Now, just before I go on, obviously the jury did believe Trump. Sorry, did believe Cohen.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the point that Cohen may be one of the least credible witnesses you've ever seen, but he's only the second least credible person in that courtroom.
Yes.
Right, when it's Cohen versus Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Trump is denying he had sex with Stormy Daniels.
Yes, yeah. Then all of a sudden that actually makes Cohen appear relatively credible, and we have to keep this in mind. But Mariotti goes on. Sorry.
You're right.
The prosecution had to prove that Mr. Trump knew about and caused, or at least was an accomplice in creating the false business records. But at the time the business records were created, Mr. Trump was in the White House. The defense could argue that Mr. Cohen and Alan Weisselberg, the Trump Organization's CFO, who's pleaded guilty to lying under oath and tax fraud, came up with the scheme on their own. Mr. Trump, his lawyers could argue, was focused on his role as president.
Yep.
But he says because of the fact that instead they were attacking every part of the prosecution, they were attacking every witness, any kind of focus that they might have had on that real weak point of the prosecution was just lost. And he says, although the prosecution's evidence of Mr. Trump's personal approval of the falsification of business records was thin, the evidence for most of the other relevant facts was rock solid. What you've just said.
Yep.
Yet the defense destroyed its own credibility by denying the undeniable, like its laughable claim that the large lump sum payments to Mr. Cohen really were payments for legal services, including the amount that he embezzled from Mr. Trump.
Yes.
Right. So, and now we've talked before about Trump, for someone who spends so much of his life in court, tends to pick very bad lawyers. But then again, even a competent lawyer has a very difficult job when they're defending Trump in a criminal trial, because Trump insists that his lawyers act as campaign surrogates, right? A normal defense lawyer in this situation might actually concede a lot of the stuff except for the crime at issue.
Yes.
Yeah. This is defense lawyers, in my understanding, do this all the time.
Yes.
They say, yes, yeah, he did all these things wrong, but that's not the issue. The issue is, did he actually commit this crime? And they focus on the lack of evidence that is there to convict them. Now, that strategy is just not available to Trump's lawyers. Instead, they have to say that everything that Trump did was perfect. So, yeah, going back to he never had sex with Stormy Daniels in the first place. All of that money genuinely was for legal services. Trying to maintain this line that Trump did nothing wrong, it does quickly destroy your credibility. As Judge Michon noted in the first week, that was a bad sign. Yeah. That was the first point at which I began to think that the prosecution might actually win, is when the judge is telling the lead defense lawyer that he's destroying his own credibility.
Yeah, the judge was leading an intervention into the defense, an unsuccessful intervention.
Yeah. So, I am not doubting at this point the strength of the argument that the prosecution made and how convincing it was to the jury, but I am suggesting that Trump did not help his own case at all. And I'm sure that, his out-of-court antics didn't help, but what really didn't help, I think, is the constraints that he put his own defense under. Yeah.
Fair enough. I'd like to also follow up on something I talked about. I'm not sure if it was with you or with Melina. It was last week. It was about the assignment of Michon, whether it was random or handpicked. Yeah. Did I talk about that with you?
No, you didn't. No.
Oh, okay. Essentially, thanks to one of our German peppers, who's David, who put me onto a few links, it became clear, or at least it seemed back in April last year, that Michon was intentionally chosen. He was handpicked to be Trump's judge because he was also in charge of all of Trump's other crimes in New York.
Ah, right.
At least the criminal crimes.
Yeah.
And the theory was, at least according to this article I read from the Wall Street Journal, that they were picking him over and over again because once he established familiarity with Trump, the Trump organization, then he could be more efficient.
Yes, yep.
And he could be a bad judge.
Yeah.
Like he'd be the opposite of Eileen Cannon.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that was the logic. And I wasn't 100% sure I agreed that he should have been the one to become the Trump judge, given that there were some, even like whether you're talking this pissy donation, a $15 donation to Biden through merch, or you're talking about his daughter, the daughter situation, whatever. Like it would have been better if it was a different judge. That's my view. I was yesterday I was suddenly a little bit nervous because I read about Elise Stefanik, who filed a complaint with the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct. She said, because the rules of the New York State trial courts require criminal actions be assigned to a judge via random selection, authorized by the chief administrator. And I thought, okay, she's the least reliable person on earth. Yeah. But at the same time, she's a lawyer. Like, she should know this. And then she's putting in complaints. She's quoting rules. Like, presumably that's true.
Come on. Lawyering, Ted Cruz is a lawyer as well.
Yeah.
How much do you trust his constitutional law opinions?
Well, I trust him more than I trust Elise Stefanik. I'll tell you that.
Yes, yeah.
But having said that, I thought to myself, you know what, you're going to talk to a judge today.
Yeah.
Why don't you ask the judge about this?
Yeah.
Because we spoke to Shira Shenlin, who's been a judge in New York for a very long time. So she should know.
Yeah.
This is what she says. My final question, Judge, is about Judge Merchan's appointment. There's been a lot of confusion about this. Judge Merchan has been appointed to a number of cases involving Donald Trump over the last few years, and I've read that is because he has expertise in dealing with Trump. They keep on appointing him to deal with Trump more because he knows about Trump. But on the other hand, some people are saying it's meant to be a random assignment. So what's the truth there?
Many courts have what's called a related case rule. And if a case is related to a prior case that the judge has, then the judge takes the related case. And since he was the judge on the Trump Organization case, it's not inappropriate that he then got this case, which involved the Trump Organization, which was part of the conspiracy to falsify the records. It is his organization. So I wasn't so troubled by that, but I can understand the appearance. It looked like they picked him. I don't think so. I think it's just a related case.
So there you go.
There you go.
Elise Stefanik, full of shit and or dishonest. But anyway, I think we got to the bottom of that one.
Yes, yeah.
So it's
by the way, just to clarify my earlier comments about the jury, I'm not saying that the jury is infallible. And as you say, it'll be appealed to. All I'm saying is the jury's much better positioned to deliver a verdict than any of the idiot commentators who have been mouthing off about this. Yeah. And there's been a lot of fucking mouthing off going on.
Yeah. Well, look, I got to say, having gone through that process, I know it was lengthy.
Yeah.
Of actually looking through the instructions, I think that I'm almost certainly would have found Trump guilty by those instructions as well.
Yeah.
The question is the instructions.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Absolutely.
But that's not the jury's fault.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah. I suppose the only other question I've got right now is how should Biden handle this? And the reason I say that is because 6 weeks ago in Politico, there was an article which said Biden camp decides not to take the bait on Trump's stormy trial. The president made a decision to stay the hell out of the way of his opponent's criminal proceeding. The president believes in the norms, one White House official told the paper. It only takes one utterance from Joe Biden for the weaponization of government bullshit to become more of a reality. And 6 weeks later, we have this press conference involving Robert De Niro.
Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he could destroy the world. A government that, as President Lincoln said, of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. You know that. He will never leave.
My favourite bit, actually, I didn't play. I mean, that was pretty good. My favourite was where he said, right opposite the courtroom, just when the jury's going in, the fact is, whether he's acquitted, whether it's hung jury, he is guilty, and we all know it. I like that. That's really nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. That's not politicising a trial at all.
No.
So given they clearly lack judgment that they send Robert De Niro out there.
Yeah.
I mean, do you agree with me that the best thing Biden can do is just shut the hell up?
Yes, that is, because he doesn't need to do anything.
No, the media will do it for him.
The media will do it for him. Other Democrats will do it for him. He does not need to do this.
Yeah, all he can do is confirm for Trump.
Yes.
That it's a witch hunt and weaponization, election interference.
Yes.
All that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, it's not really a confirmation, but confirm in inverted commas.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so we agreed on that.
I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll read you one more paragraph and then I'm done on this trial.
Okay,
yeah. Everything else. This is from Jonah Goldberg in the Dispatch. I just thought it was a nice little turn of phrase, and I thought this summed up quite well.
Yep.
About why hysteria doesn't help. And I'm thinking about you, Robert De Niro.
Yep.
It's the point I'm trying to make is that political derangement is dialectical. I should also note that the anti-Trump hysterics are to some extent helping Trump. The more they shed decency and norms while railing about Trump's rejection of decency and norms, the more they ratify his worldview. He wants you to think all the rules are BS, mere facades designed to keep the deep state or the, quote, Marxist and fascists in power. He wants you to think that decency and decorum are for suckers because that makes his indecency and crudeness seem honest and authentic. If the current regime, in inverted commas, is corrupt, undemocratic and authoritarian, then the choice isn't between democracy and authoritarianism. It's between their authoritarianism and ours. And I regret to tell you, if that's the contest, Trump will win. In a contest between frail and vacillating authoritarianism and confident and strong authoritarianism, the strong and confident will most likely prevail. I don't think Biden is an authoritarian. His indefensible use of executive orders notwithstanding. But he's failing at convincing people that this isn't that this isn't the choice. He's lost the ability to defend and exude a sense of normalcy. He's leaning into a left-wing moral panic in hopes that's less terrifying than a right-wing moral panic. I think he's got the better argument, but he's a terrible salesman for it. That's fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah, you're happy to just accept that.
I am happy not to comment on it.
Fair enough. Well, why don't you comment on Judge Alito?
Sorry, before that. There's just a couple more things to say.
Say all the things.
First is that, there have been some predictably bad reactions to this.
Yes. Any favourites?
Yeah, the two.
Yeah.
One is from JD Vance.
Oh, of course.
Saying that Judge Machan and everyone involved in this trial needs to be subpoenaed because there needs to be an investigation into whether George Soros ordered Alvin Bragg to go after Trump in order to cripple his chances. Yeah.
Because there's no incentive for Alvin Bragg to try and take down Donald Trump
absolutely.
Without George Soros.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's some nice little layers of, shall we say, very traditional conspiracy theorizing going on there. So that was the first one. Second, Tucker Carlson just leaning further and further into fascism than ever, saying anyone who defends this verdict is a danger to you and your family. Ooh. Now, what makes that particularly sinister from Tucker Carlson is Tucker Carlson was always the master of basically providing parents and grandparents with ammunition that their families were being used against them. That, this suspicion that the education system and the media and the Democrats, they're the reasons why your children disagree with you about these things. They're the reasons why your grandchildren ignore you on social media. Tucker Carlson is just the master of the family shit fight. Like any brawl that happens at Thanksgiving probably begins with someone quoting Tucker Carlson. And so anyone who defends this is a danger to you and your family. What he's talking about is the next family gatherings that people have where this is going to be an inevitable topic. The family member who defends this verdict, they're a threat to you and your family, right? That's so it's nasty stuff. Tucker Carlson, like Fox News, really had, I think, a pretty well-developed business model around creating family conflict because it was good for business for them. Basically, the more atomized and resentful people get, even towards their own family members, that's more time that they're spending on Fox News and more time that they're spending on Twitter. So he's really just dialing that one up further. So there's going to be a lot of inevitable speculation about how this will actually affect the election. Yep. Because it's 5 months out, I think that any possible effect from this is very, very difficult to predict, in that there could be an effect which just washes out over time, or there could be an effect which gets stronger over time. Because this is completely unprecedented, we have no historical guidance as to what it's going to be. Based on current poll data, so there was a Reuters Ipsos poll that found, I think there was something like that 10% of Republicans would reconsider their vote for Trump if he was convicted, but 4% would actually change their vote if he was convicted. Now,
hypotheticals.
Yeah, hypotheticals. Now, if that were true, that's a problem for Trump because losing 4% of the Republican vote with the polls the way they are would be a problem. But yeah, these questions taking place before the conviction, when most Republicans probably would have been fairly sure that Trump wasn't going to get convicted. Give a lot of rein to social desirability bias, like telling them, I wouldn't vote for this guy if he gets convicted. But they're saying this in the anticipation, of course he's not going to get convicted. Biden's probably going to get convicted at some point. So, we may well see that effect goes away. Having said that, then I've also been asked repeatedly today, this will help Trump, won't it? Which I just don't get that idea at all.
Jesse Watters, literally straight off the... I watched this on Fox News. Jesse Watters literally straight off the announcement said, I just want... His first words were, I want to congratulate Donald Trump on winning the 2024 election.
Yeah.
He's going...
No, this is how much... Trump has kind of Trump-brained everyone in the media. Yes, they've seen over the years that whatever he does, it just seems to endear him to his own base.
Yes.
More.
You can only vote once.
Yeah. So, yes, exactly, yeah. So, a lot of people seem to go to this idea, it'll just make his supporters even madder. It's like, it doesn't matter. These were people who were voting for him no matter what. The question is around marginal voters. Voters who are either choosing between the two candidates or who are choosing whether to vote or to stay home in the first place. Now, it is entirely possible that there are some of them out there who are planning to stay home but now plan to vote for Trump. That's not going to outweigh numbers of people who go in the other direction.
Yeah. I completely agree with you on that. By the way, I should just apologize for those who are watching the feed. Every now and then I close my eyes. It's not because Dave's boring. He's very interesting.
It's just because you haven't slept.
It's just because I haven't slept.
Yes.
And it just catches up with me every now and then.
Yeah. It comes back to after 2016, a lot of the media developed this mental model that the real average voter out there is fundamentally a Trump voter. And the only question is, are they activated for the election or not?
I have a very interesting section about this coming up.
Okay, yes.
But let's do Alito first.
Okay. Yes. So I know that you've already talked about this, but there have been new developments.
There have been so many new developments.
Yeah. Okay, so the original story is that in the days leading up to Biden's inauguration, in 2021, neighbours saw an upside-down flag flying outside of the Alito's house.
Yes.
This has been well documented in photos. A Washington Post reporter was actually sent there at the time. but didn't report on it because they accepted that it was Martha Ann Alito who had raised the flag.
Yeah.
I still think it was a fairly newsworthy story, but anyway, so the New York Times reported on this 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
No one's denying that the flag was upside down, but Alito said, yes, it was my wife who raised that flag. I didn't have any say over that. Martha Ann Alito says that she was escalating a neighborhood conflict because someone had been putting up anti-Trump lawn signs.
Yes.
And this was how she had responded. The Alitos live in a politically fraught street, which is politically fraught largely because they live there. So when there were protests outside the Alito's house after Roe versus Wade was overturned, some of their neighbours were joining in the protests.
That's fraught.
Yes, that is fraught, and it's subsequently come out that this particular neighbour that they had a dispute with called Mrs. Alito the C word, although that apparently happened after the whole flag thing. So the upside down flag, that's a universal maritime symbol of distress, has become appropriated as a symbol of political protest on the right. You may have seen upside down flags in Australia at anti-5G protests. It was a symbol that was widely used in January 6th. It is an odd thing to put up in a neighbourhood dispute. Like someone puts up an anti-Trump sign, you respond with an upside down American flag. It is a very odd thing, but okay, we'll leave that aside for a moment.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that later on.
Okay, So after the New York Times reported on this, then about a week later, they reported, well, this was not the only controversial flag that an Alito had flown outside an Alito property.
Yes.
The Alito's summer home on Long Island between, I think it was July and September last year, there was a flag known as the Pine Tree flag or the Appeal to Heaven flag that was flying on their property, along with a Philadelphia Phillies flag and some other American flags. So this is from the Revolutionary War era. It was a naval flag. It's got a picture of a pine tree. You are really about to pass out.
I'll get there.
Okay, I'll try and keep this as interesting as possible.
No. You're doing a great job, honestly.
With the line...
If you weren't interesting, I'd already be asleep.
Okay. Yeah, with the words, an appeal to heaven above.
Do you know why it says appeal to heaven?
No.
I can tell you.
Yeah, tell me.
It's from John Locke's second treatise on government.
I should have known that.
Where the body of the people or any single man is deprived of their right or is under the exercise of a power without right and have no appeal on earth, then they have a liberty to appeal to heaven.
Right.
Whenever they judge the cause of sufficient moment. So if the king's a tyrant, then the only body you can appeal to then is above them, and that's God.
Yes.
That's the
and
idea.
this, by the way, is from a very famous tract, as I said, this is why I should have known this, that was justifying the right of the people to rebel.
Yes.
Yeah. So very significant in the Revolutionary War. Reporting says that it had fallen into obscurity since the Revolutionary War. That's not entirely correct. It was the official maritime ensign of the the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
Until 1971. And it was traditionally seen, according to Wikipedia, as a symbol of New England.
Yep.
Which is odd that it would be flying then on Long Island, which is not New England.
Good call.
Yeah. Very important point. Now... there have been photos of this flag taken from multiple angles. The Alitos were very slow to respond to that. But in response to Democratic calls for Alito to recuse himself from January 6th cases, because it was a bit worrying that this appeal to heaven flag, which was used by January 6th rioters, went up while January 6th cases were coming to the Supreme Court. It's a little bit worrying that that timing. But Alito wrote a letter in response to these demands for recusal.
Yes.
And he basically said, I am not fond of flying flags, but my wife is. Yes. Said, we own this property jointly. Yep. She can fly whatever flags she wants.
Yep.
Nothing I can do to make her take them down.
That's right.
Yeah. Now... I don't know whether to be impressed by the kind of philosophy of autonomy going on here.
He's a super feminist.
Or to think that it's a bit weird that in a marriage where you're a Supreme Court justice and your wife is doing something that really endangers the appearance of impartiality that's very important to your job, that you in this job, which basically involves spending all day listening to arguments and formulating arguments, were unable to persuade your own wife that perhaps it wasn't the greatest idea to fly this flag outside our property. I mean, I don't know. I think that marriage is something more than a joint property ownership venture.
He doesn't think so.
Well, so that is that's the story of the flags so far.
Yeah, I'm trying to find.
Anyway, obviously he's not recusing himself.
No, he's not. No, he's not. I'll go a bit to add on this.
Yes,
I mean, you've hit the major concerns, but okay. Look, what I want to do. This is what I want to introduce to this.
Yes,
I want to introduce two things. The first of which is I want to compare. His very detailed story in his letter. And plus what he also told Shannon Breen before. From Fox News. I want to compare that to the New York Times follow-up where they interviewed Emily Baden, who is the sign maker. And she has a wonderful tendency to send text messages at contemporaneous times, detailing everything that's happening. So she has some evidence backing her up.
Right, yes.
So anyway, let's go through this. Okay, so first of all, let me just read you out Shannon Breen's description of Alito's story. This is his basic story. In addition to what's in the story, he told me a neighbor on the street had a "Fuck Trump" sign that was within 50 feet of where children await the school bus.
Children.
In January 21. Mrs. Alito brought this up with a neighbour. According to Justice Alito, things escalated and the neighbour put up a sign personally addressing Mrs. Alito and blaming her for the January 6th attacks. Justice Alito says he and his wife were walking in the neighbourhood and there were words between Mrs. Alito and a male at the home with the sign. Alito says the man engaged in vulgar language, including the C word. Following that exchange, Mrs. Alito was distraught and hung the flag upside down for a short time. Justice Alito says some neighbours on the street are very political and acknowledges it was a heated time in January 2021. Okay, now, the other person doesn't just disagree, like I said. She has corroboration. So let's go through the differences.
Yes, okay.
First, Alito said it was a "Fuck Trump" sign within 50 feet of where children await the school bus. This is January 2021. They're in lockdown. So there are no school children. Number one. Number two, we also know that maybe it wasn't actually a "Fuck Trump" sign. Because what the lady said, Emily Baden, is that the sign had two signs. On one side it said "By Don." And the other side said "Fuck Trump." And there's a photo of it in the piece, so we can see this. We don't know what side was facing the street. So it potentially was "Fuck Trump." We just don't know. That's unconfirmed. But it was hanging up in December. Not in late January. It was hanging up well before the flag incident. According to Emily Baden, shortly after Christmas, she was with her dog in her front yard when Mrs. Alito approached her and thanked her for taking down the sign, which had blown down. Mrs. Alito said it was offensive, and Baden told her the sign's going to stay up. But she couldn't remember whether she put the sign up again. Okay, so that's the first bit. Then Alito says the neighbour put up a sign personally addressing Mrs. Alito and blaming her for the January 6th attacks. We know what the sign said.
What did it say?
"Trump is a fascist" was one. And the other one said, "You are complicit." Now, Baden says the second sign was not directed at the Alitos, but at Republicans generally, especially those who weren't condemning the Capitol attack. No, it didn't mention January 6th at all, let alone blaming Alito for it. But it did go up on January 6th, so you can understand the connection. All right. But was it directed at the Alitos? Here's a bit of information for you, Dave, you might not know. The Baden house didn't have a direct view of the Alito residence. So I don't know why they would assume that the signs are talking to them. Given they can't even see the signs unless they walk down the road.
I'm getting flashbacks to the Simpsons Two Bad Neighbors episode.
Yes.
Yeah, but okay, so it's not a Two Bad Neighbors scenario where the houses are facing each other.
No.
Yeah.
But having said that, there is at least one bad neighbour, I'll tell you that. Okay, so then
Yep.
Alito doesn't mention this bit at all, but the Badens say the day after the Capitol riot, January 7,
Yeah.
as the couple parked in front of their home, Mrs. Alito pulled up in her car, lingered there, and glared at them for a long moment. They texted their friends about it at the time. I can understand why you would. Then we have the upside down flag. By the way, that was it. That's what prompted the upside down flag.
Wow.
Okay, so it was a sign that said Trump is it was like over a month earlier.
Yes, yeah.
There was the fuck Trump sign falling down.
Yeah.
And then on January 6th was the Trump is a fascist and you are complicit, not even to the Alitos. And then 11 days later, the upside down flag went up. That's quite a slow reaction.
That is,
if they're reacting to it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so so 11 days later, she puts up the upside down flag, Mrs. Alito. Alito says it hung for a short time. It hung for several days, according to the neighbours, and in fact, Alito later admitted that. Okay, and the Badens said they never even saw the upside down flag because they were down the road and they couldn't see each other's houses, right? Then Alito doesn't mention this bit either, but the Badens say they decided to drive past the Alito home. There was a part of me that's like, this is on Inauguration Day, 21st. There's a part of me that's like, let's see what's going on, Miss Baden said. Mrs. Alito happened to be staying outside. According to interviews with Mrs. Baden and her husband, as well as messages they sent to friends at the time, Mrs. Alito ran towards the car and yelled something they did not understand. The couple continued driving, and as they passed the Alito home again to exit the cul-de-sac, Mrs. Alito appeared to spit towards the vehicle. They might go, well, what about the C word? What happened to that? Alito said he and his wife were walking in the neighbourhood and there were words between Mrs. Alito and a male at the home with a sign. Alito says the man engaged in vulgar language, including the C word, and following the exchange, Mrs. Alito was distraught and hung the flag upside down. Remember that? For a short time. Yeah, in the letter to Congress, he also added that he said a house on the street displayed a sign attacking her personally. That never happened.
Yep.
And a man who was living in the house at the time trailed her all the way down the street and berated her in my presence using foul language, including what I regard as the vilest epithet that can be addressed to a woman. That's Alito's side of the story. We know the sign part isn't true.
Yep.
The Badens said they were pulling in trash bins when the Alitos, who seemed to be on a stroll, appeared. Mrs. Alito addressed the pair by name, used an expletive and called them fascists, the couple told the Times, and said in text at the time. Justice Alito remained silent, they added. The Alitos began to walk away. That was when Emily Baden snapped, she said. She does not remember her precise words, but she recalls something like this. How dare you behave this way? You've been harassing us over signs. You represent the highest court in the land. Shame on you. And Ms. Baden said that she, not her partner, used the lewd expression, the C word. So he doesn't even remember who said it. And she says, I will fully cop to that. And by the way, I believe her because a neighbour standing in the street also backed her up and said he heard her say the word.
Yeah.
And that was on, do you know the date? February 15.
Wow.
That was like 3 weeks after the upside down flag. So there's a lot of things that Alito doesn't seem to remember. Now, does any of this make any difference? Well, it makes it clear that Mrs. Alito is the psycho one, I think.
Yep.
It also makes it clear Alito probably did have nothing to do with it.
Yes.
To be fair to Alito.
Yes. Yeah.
Although he seems to be a liar.
Yeah.
It also makes the upside down flag even stranger. Like, what the hell was the upside down? What was it in response to? It's in response to nothing. It's just psycho behavior.
Maybe she fell down a deep rabbit hole of watching Mr. Squiggle on YouTube. Upside down.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Who knows what's going on in that head?
That is a much more joyous image than I have previously had about Mrs. Alito, I have to say. Does this change our view of Washington Post not running the story? Because they said they originally examined the story but concluded it appeared Alito's wife was responsible and that it was not clear the neighborhood argument was over politics. I think they nailed it.
Yeah.
Even though they still should run the story.
They still should run the story.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Okay, and then a few more of the random things from the letter. Alito said, as I've stated publicly, I had nothing whatsoever to do with the flying of that flag. I was not even aware of the upside-down flag until it was called to my attention. As soon as I saw it, I asked my wife to take it down, but for several days she refused. That's an odd wording, isn't it? She refused. Why didn't he just take it down himself? I mean,
no, 'cause it's her property.
Yeah, exactly. My wife and I own our Virginia home jointly. She therefore has the legal right to use the property as she sees fit. And there were no additional steps I could have taken to have the flag taken down more promptly. So weak. Okay. And then with the second flag, he said that it was all her.
Yeah.
He didn't know about it. But I believe him. I actually do believe him. And I don't think the second flag is a stop the steal thing anyway. I think it's a religious thing, personally. But anyway. Also, interesting, he says, as soon as I saw it, let's just focus on that phrase I just read. As soon as I saw it, I asked my wife to take it down. Why did he think the flag should be taken down? If he doesn't think it's a problem. He said he wanted to take it down immediately.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
Because he's saying that there's nothing wrong with the flag. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're all the differences in accounts.
Yeah.
And now, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
One of the flags flying in Long Island was a Philadelphia Phillies flag.
Yes.
Alito's a well-known fan of the Phillies.
Is Mrs. Alito a fan
I
of the
don't
Phillies?
know, but I've just got some doubt about his, I don't like flying flags thing when, the flag of his beloved childhood baseball team is,
That's a good pickup, Dave. I like it. I mean, he's clearly a liar.
Yes.
That is clear.
Yes.
Okay, the other thing I want to just focus on with this, which is new, is in his letter, his reasons for why he went recused.
Yep.
Is about the ethics code. And what I want to do is I want to compare the ethics code to the law.
Okay.
Because he's hiding behind this super weak Supreme Court ethics code. Ethics code says, 1, a justice is presumed impartial and has an obligation to sit unless disqualified.
Yep.
2, a justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. That is, where an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties. The federal statute says, any justice, judge, or magistrate judge of the United States that shall disqualify himself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned.
Yep.
Note it says any justice.
Yes.
So it applies to him.
Okay.
Even if he completely ignored it in his letter and pretended it didn't exist, which is very much it's pretty much part of the course of Alito's general legal interpretation, I might say.
Yep.
Anyway, now the differences between the law and the ethics code. The ethics code has a presumption of impartiality and an obligation to sit if not disqualified. The statute has neither.
Right.
The ethics code says he should disqualify himself. The statute says he shall disqualify himself. The ethics code says the reasonable person must be aware of all relevant circumstances, and that's why he's telling us the intimate details of their property ownership. Statute says any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. No special knowledge is required. Public knowledge is enough.
Yes.
Ethics code says individual justices rather than the court decide recusal issues. So Alito has the final word, hence his letter. Statute says you can appeal the decision to a higher court, so the rest of the Supreme Court can sit in on Alito. So, surprise, surprise, Alito is choosing to only follow the lax code and didn't even mention the statute. All right, my view is the code makes all the difference.
Yeah.
If you know everything about what happened, then Alito isn't at fault. I mean, he's a liar. But I think even using Baden's take,
Yes.
Alito did nothing.
Yeah.
And I do believe that Mrs. Alito is the upside down flag hanger, which I think is the problematic flag. But that's only if you know everything that happened.
Yes, yeah.
Right? That's what the ethics code demands.
Yes, yeah.
But if you're just a member of the public seeing a dude flying an upside down flag outside their house just after January 6th, you don't want that person singing judgment on January 6th cases.
Yeah,
so the statute says you recuse.
Yes, yeah.
The ethics code says, nah, maybe not.
And just a tiny little bit more context, the upside down flag as well. So this is a few weeks after January 6th, but in the lead up to Biden's inaugurations, there were all kinds of other protests across the US where the upside down flag was being flown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
The distress. So it wasn't even just about January 6th. It was a real protest against the fact that Biden was becoming the president.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well done. Okay. I don't have anything else to say about that.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to. Okay. I reckon we got time for two more things. Okay. Let's go. Okay. I'll do one, then you do one. Let's go to the contempt motion because that's getting quite old.
Okay.
Okay. You don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
I'm talking about Jim Jordan and James Comer's desperate attempts to get the audio of Biden's special counsel.
Okay. Yes.
A few weeks back.
Yeah. Let's go.
Okay. Now, I'm going to actually just talk about the law about this for a little bit, and then we'll get into the fun bit, which I think you all know what's coming.
Yes.
They started off kind of stupid, this. And I remember back when it first started, I was saying, geez, these guys have been idiots.
Yes. Yep.
But they actually smartened up over time.
Wow.
Yeah, they really did. Okay, so they subpoenaed the audio to begin with. We're talking the audio of, I'm talking about the special counsel report into Joe Biden.
Yes.
How Joe Biden forgot the year that his son died.
Yep.
He forgot when he was vice president. And they handed out transcript. Like they actually released the transcript, and then Comer and Jim Jordan went, can you give us the audio, please? We promise we won't make attack ads out of it. Honest. Come on. And they just wouldn't give them the audio, obviously. So the House subpoenaed the audio. What's their justification?
Yep.
The information that the committee requires and the department is in possession of is necessary for the committee to consider potential legislative reforms to the department and its use of special counsels to conduct investigations of current and former presidents of the United States.
Yep.
Okay, so what legislative reforms require audio when you have a transcript? That's a very interesting question. I would ask. Okay, obviously, that's just stupid.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and then the DOJ just said nah, and then they said nah, we want it, and they go nah, and they go we're gonna hold you in contempt, and then Biden asserted executive privilege, which theoretically should protect Garland. Okay, the quote from Uriarty, the Assistant Attorney General. It's the long-standing position of the executive branch held by administrations of both parties that an official who asserts the president's claim of executive privilege cannot be prosecuted for criminal contempt of Congress. So it's protecting Garland. Okay. Why did they claim executive privilege?
Yep.
The president has a duty to safeguard the integrity and independence of executive branch law enforcement functions and protect them from undue partisan interference that could weaken those functions in future. As you know, the Attorney General has warned that the disclosure of materials like these audio recordings risk harming future law enforcement investigations by making it less likely that witnesses in high-profile investigations will voluntarily cooperate.
Good point.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't understand that because you got a lot of guys saying, executive privilege. What are you talking about? You guys don't. Were they your advisors? Are they your is Robert Hur Joe Biden's advisor? Why isn't it executive privilege? Is he keeping secrets? They didn't.
I love these voices that you're doing. This is a new thing.
There's a new string to my bow.
Yeah.
I call that voice Chuckles.
Chuckles.
Chuckles
the Yahoo.
But yeah, if you listen to the quote I just said, Chuckles, you know that that they weren't claiming decision making privilege. They were claiming law enforcement privilege.
Yeah.
which is to protect the law enforcement functions of the executive.
Yes,
and
yeah,
they had
yeah.
a good reason.
Yes.
Their reason was correct. People won't be recorded, won't allow
Yes.
themselves to be recorded in the future if they think that's going to get used on an attack act.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's actually spot on. And that's a clever response,
Yeah, yeah.
I think. That's when the House got smart, because then they changed their reasoning.
That's when they got less dumb.
Yeah. And then they said
Yeah.
that the reason they wanted the records are necessary to determine whether sufficient grounds exist to draft articles of impeachment against Biden.
Okay.
And the reason that's smart, I mean, that's obviously clearly bullshit.
Yes, yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, but it's smarter than what they were saying before.
Totally.
Yes.
totally.
Yeah.
The reason that's smart is because courts show a lot of deference to impeachment
Yeah.
demands, right? So it's like that's trumping the executive privilege claim, right?
They must have been so happy when ChatGPT came up with that answer for them. Where they asked, how should we ask for this audio? Yeah.
I believe actually they it wasn't just ChatGPT. They got one of the more recent AI programs that actually speaks rather than just types. And I actually got a sneak preview of what the voice was. Oh, what you got to do, guys? Use the impeachment power, guys. Anyway.
Chuckles.
Chuckles GPT.
Yeah. When Sky was retired, Chuckles was brought in.
Anyway, so they got a bit smarter, and they made it about impeachment. And the thing that's smart about that is not only do the courts show more deference, but also there's no clearly established precedent for this.
Yep.
Because for the decision-making power, not decision-making, for legislative power, for legislative subpoenas, there's the Trump tax case. That's the Mazars one, right?
Yeah.
And they went through this whole process, which is going to take forever, and they wouldn't have qualified for it because they had a bullshit reason, which the court was just going, nah, and they would have got rid of them. So, but now it's not so clear because there's no clear precedent. Both of the claims are clearly in bad faith, obviously. In fact, Comer proved just how much he cares about his legislative intentions and his assessment of whether there's anything impeachable here with his fundraising letter that he put out a few days after his claim. I couldn't find the actual letter, but I did find a clip of Jared Moskowitz reading it out sarcastically.
Oh, good old Jared.
So I'll play that.
Yeah.
Now Biden and his advisors are terrified that I, James Comer, will release the recordings, forcing the media and the Democrats to answer for the dismal decline of Biden's mental state. He even had attorney Merrick Garland write a letter saying that his interview falls within the scope of executive privilege. This could be the final blow with swing voters across the country. Okay.
So, pretty bad faith.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, but legally, this is actually interesting territory because you got impeachment power versus law enforcement executive privilege, where there's already a transcript out there which make both claims seem quite minor.
Yes.
All right. There were some analogues about this during the Nixon tapes era, by the way, but it's not exactly the same. So it's potentially new law.
Yes.
And it's also complicated by a waiver claim from James Comer. The Chuckles GPT told him this one as well.
Yeah.
The White House is asserting executive privilege over the recordings, but it's already waived privilege by releasing the transcript of the interview, which on the face of it seems like a reasonable point to make.
Yeah.
But since the government is asserting law enforcement executive privilege, I do think they get around that because the concern is not about the information. The concern is about stopping people not wanting to do interviews in the future.
Yeah.
And the audio makes a difference there.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to hold. But anyway, they're going to take it to court. And since this is a new scenario, it's going to be all the same delays as the Trump cases. So this will be resolved sometime in 2025.
Great.
But that's the legals for it.
Look forward to it.
Okay, so that's the background. Now we've gone through that. Now we cue the idiots.
Yes.
Which is when they start voting on whether to hold Garland in contempt at nighttime. Why nighttime? Because during the day, too many committee members headed off to the red tie brigade for Donald Trump during the day, so they didn't have quorum. And then they came back on a flight and they were hitting the piss apparently on the plane on the way back.
Yeah.
And they acted like it when they got back into committee. This is the result. It starts with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jasmine Crockett having an exchange. This is the full exchange.
I'd like to know if any of the Democrats on this committee are employing Judge Merchan's daughter.
Please tell me what that has to do with Merrick Garland.
Is she a porn star?
Oh, Goldman. That's right. He's advising. Okay.
He's advising who? What? Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No,
what you're
ain't
reading.
nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order.
Mr. Chairman,
That's beneath
would
even
you
you
please
regain
order
order
of
of
your
you.
committee.
Order.
I do have a point of order, and I would like to move to take down Ms. Greene's words. That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your feelings hurt?
Her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play. with
Baby
me.
girl? I don't think
we are
so.
going to move, and we're going to take your words down.
I
Thank you very
second that motion.
So who will have to pay us? Okay. Ms. Greene agrees to strike her words.
I believe she
Chair
needs to apologize.
recognizes
No.
Mr.
She
Perry.
needs to apologize.
Okay, hold on. Then after Mr. Perry's going to be recognized, then Ms. Green
I'm not
has 4 minutes and
apologizing.
21
Well,
seconds.
then
Okay,
you're
reserve
not
the right to
striking your
object.
words.
I am
Mr.
not
Chair,
apologizing.
Now let's go. Come on, guys.
Why don't you debate me?
Mr. Chairman, the
it's
minority.
pretty self-evident.
You're not.
Yeah, you're not.
out of order.
You don't have enough
You're out of order.
intelligence.
Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Okay, move to strike
I'd like to
I
strike
move to
those
strike the
words
lady's
as well.
I move to
I would
strike-
like to
Order.
strike
The
those
lady's
as well.
words again.
That's 2 requests to strike. That's 2 requests to strike.
Oh, they cannot take the
There's
words.
another motion to strike her words again. Please
All right.
get
Okay.
your members under
Here's
control.
the correct apology. Ms. Green, do you agree to unanimous consent to strike your words?
I repeat again for the second time. Yes, I'll
All
strike
right.
my words,
That-
but I'm not
all right.
apologizing.
Without objection. Without
Not
objection.
apologizing.
21 seconds.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Who's
It's me.
Ms. Crockett?
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those words.
I don't think that's a
Hold on.
part
I'm
of it.
trying to find clarification on what quality.
Chairman, motion to
I
strike
had no
those
idea
words.
what you just said.
We're not gonna do this. Look, you guys earlier literally just said
You
yes.
just voted to do
Y'all did
it.
it first, so you don't
just
want to
voted to do
Say
it.
you're gonna get
Order,
Marjorie
order.
on
I'm
the
trying to
lead.
get clarification.
Look at calm down. Calm down.
No, because this
I
is
would
what
like to
y'all
get
do.
through proceedings.
So I'm trying
Hey,
to
Ms.
get
Crockett,
clarification.
you're not
Y'all wanna
recognized.
play
Ms.
games.
I can't hear
Crockett.
you with your
And
yelling.
You don't want
Calm
me to
down.
Be,
Can
no,
you please calm
don't
down?
tell me to calm down.
Calm down.
Because y'all
Please
talk
calm
noise,
down.
and then
You're
can't
out of
take
control.
Because if I
Look,
come,
Chairman,
if I
can
come
we
and
send
talk
outside to
shit
take a
about
break
her,
for 5
y'all
minutes?
gonna have a problem.
Chairman.
I want to play that whole lot because I don't think people have heard the whole lot. And the more you hear, the less edifying it becomes. Okay. And if you didn't recognise, there's AOC in the middle talking about taking down words.
Say what now?
Okay, so what are your thoughts on that, Dave? What do you reckon? What do you reckon Chuckles would think about that?
Chuckles would think that this is the greatest example of democratic deliberation he's ever
He
seen.
probably would. He
Yeah.
probably would. I don't really know where to start. I mean, first of all, Marjorie Taylor Greene's obsession with not apologising is so pathetic.
Yes, it is.
It really is.
Yeah.
She only had to say it once, but she won't. But she said it like 8 times
Yes, yeah.
because for her it was the most important thing to emphasise.
Yeah.
Because she is intellectually 6 years old, and I particularly like the irony of her saying you're not intelligent enough to debate me.
Yeah.
Was just amazing.
That was awesome. Yes.
But anyway,
But she's been, for those of you not familiar with the context, ever since Marjorie Taylor Greene got to Congress, she's been following AOC around demanding that she debates her. It's never clear about what. Yeah. So even here, this is just another opportunity for her to say, you should debate me. Yeah.
She's kind of like the poster child for Dunning-Kruger, I feel.
Yeah, she really is.
But anyway,
Yes.
okay, but I just want to talk about. I just want to be not entirely serious, but slightly serious about this. In that, I think the context of this is important because how did the clip start off? It started off with Marjorie Taylor Greene asking, I'd like to know if any of the Democrats on this committee are employing Judge Merchan's daughter.
Yeah.
Completely irrelevant trolling,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
People just, they were a bit confused.
Yeah.
But they just accepted it.
Yeah.
And it was obviously typical of the dialogue they have come to expect.
Yes, yeah.
And also, you notice how Raskin really quietly there, really in a really sort of cheeky way said, is she a porn star?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, this is the environment in which they operate, where they spend all day trolling each other, right? With lame insults. And it's in this context that some moron like Marjorie Taylor Greene comes in, pushes it that little bit too far, and then off we go to the races, which is what happened there, right? So I would argue that while she herself is obviously a cancer on Congress, the problem is actually the environment that she is thriving in.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what can you do about it?
You can take your bleach, blonde, bad-built bush body and go home.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's helping.
I'll look. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, like, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking if they do nothing, if they chuck a Michelle Obama, and go high when they go low, Marjorie Taylor Greene is pushing that clip around Twitter, going, look how I own them, and raising money out of it, and it's encouraging her to do more.
Yeah, that might be what Democrats are looking for at this point. Like she is becoming a pariah.
That is true.
In the Republican Party and on the right. Like right-wing media is turning against her. Other Republicans are they just openly loathe her.
Yeah.
Democrats might think, let's make her the face of the Republican Party.
I suppose.
Like,
But I mean, while that might have some marginal benefits in an election, like marginal.
No, it's not good for democracy.
It's not good for Congress, I would have thought. No. And like, it's only going to attract more of them.
Yes.
Like, if she becomes the poster child of Congress, which she rapidly is, there's going to be more Marjorie Taylor Greenes. And it's just like a cycle, you know? I mean, I was kind of thinking about this. You need to shut her up. Or at least you need to respond. You need to respond.
Yeah.
But you can't respond by doing what she does back at her. Like I mean, I'm sure Jasmine Crockett feels good about that. She's actually put out a T-shirt with that on it. The bleach blonde bad built butch body.
Yeah.
Craig Rucastle bought me one of them. I'm gonna wear it on Planet America. She's also selling hats and hoodies and socks and T-shirts. She calls it the Crockett Clapback Collection.
Wow.
She likes alliteration, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so she's proud of it. She's loving it. The incentives are great for her. But yeah, I mean, I kind of think that then she's part of the problem as well. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, so what I was thinking about.
So AOC comes across as the high ground on this, but the deeply ineffective high ground.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like AOC,
the futility of the high ground.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, AOC is she's trying to address this by being responsible, but she comes off just as primary schoolish as them.
Yeah.
Like the whole, I want to take down those words.
No, she comes across as being at least a couple of years above, but
yeah, fair enough.
But still within the primary school system.
Yeah, probably year 6 rather than year 4.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, like she very much comes off as like she's appealing to teacher.
Yes.
She comes off seeming weak. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks that she owned her.
Yeah.
You know, with oh poor baby, cry more kind of stuff.
Sorry, just while we're on vertical metaphors,
there
was something that I forgot to mention earlier, which is when looking at responses to the Trump verdict.
Yeah.
I forgot the absolute best one, which is Ron DeSantis. He said, in the same way that nobody is above the law, also nobody is below the law. Think about that. Okay, back to Congress.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm not saying this is the solution, but this is the best I could come up with. I actually stopped and thought about it.
Okay, yes.
I thought that maybe the way to deal with this is to basically just say, I mean, I'd do the opposite of AOC. I'd be saying, I don't want to strike your words. I want them to be recorded for posterity.
Yeah.
So future generations can see what you actually bring to the house, which is jack shit. Like, what you bring is childish insults.
Yeah.
Let the record show this is what you are, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And this is what you're good for, puerile behavior. And and I would actually, by contrast, I would just move to have her expelled. Just go. You are not fit for this. For this institution. I'm moving a motion right now to expel her, and obviously it wouldn't get up. But the debate, of should she be expelled, at least is a pushback.
Yes,
it's the only pushback that doesn't seem pathetic.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you can have a go at her without seeming like a cloying child.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but I have no other solutions. Have you got any thoughts about what you could do?
No.
Because I actually feel sorry for people in that environment who are trying to stop it. Because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't in a lot of situations here. Anyway, I'm going to skip. I'll skip most of that. But I will say this.
Yep.
Comer has done something good.
What has he done?
He's moved he's not going to pass.
Yeah.
But he's moved a disclosure bill with Katie Porter.
Right.
It's called the Presidential Ethics Reform Act, and it would require candidates for president and vice president to disclose tax filings for the 2 years before entering the White House.
Okay.
And for every year they're in office and for 2 years after that. It will also require presidential and vice presidential candidates, along with their close family members, to make any payments, big gifts, it's more than 10,000, and loans more than 10,000 from foreign entities public. Also requires disclosure when family members accompany them on foreign travel and specify any commercial purposes. It doesn't attach any legal penalties, but it does allow Congress to use authority to pursue those financial documents. Now, Comer says it's not a partisan political tool. He says she's not doing it to pick on Trump and I'm not doing it to pick on Biden. I think it's obviously not the case in both their cases.
Yep.
Like she is picking on Trump and he is picking on Biden, but who cares? It's good legislation.
Yes.
And to me, ironically, we've been talking about legislative investigations for legislative purposes.
Yeah.
That's a legislative purpose from the Hunter Biden.
There you go.
That's how scandals should work.
Yes.
To actually learn from them and to close loopholes. So that's how the system should operate. So So Chuckles, go off to the corner. Comer did something good. Okay, I'm off. See you, Chuckles. Okay,
this is now a
Dave.
three-man podcast. Chaz, Dr. Dave, and Chuckles.
Your last one, I think, is the Florida thing, yeah?
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that?
I like to call this Assassination Watch.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Did Biden try to have Trump assassinated?
I'm guessing no.
Well, it depends on who you ask, Chaz.
Okay, who are we going to ask?
It really depends on who you ask.
All right.
There have been a lot of Republicans claiming there was an assassination attempt going on.
Yep.
Steve Bannon claimed the Trump Biden administration had carried out an assassination attempt. Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote, the Biden DOJ and FBI were planning to assassinate Pres Trump and gave the green light. And Trump also said that FBI officers came locked and loaded to Mar-a-Lago. So what are they talking about?
Yeah, this must be based on reality, surely.
Oh, of course it's based on reality. Yes. Yeah, it is absolutely based on reality. So what happened was somebody rather mischievously selectively quoted the unsealed filings on the FBI raid.
Yep.
You won't be surprised to know that it was Trump's legal team that mischievously misquoted it. The document that was mischievously misquoted was... It said, so according to an operations order produced in Discovery, this is Trump's legal team saying this, the FBI believed its objective for the Mar-a-Lago raid was to seize classified information, NDI and US government records as described in the search warrant. The order contained a policy statement regarding use of deadly force, which stated, for example, law enforcement officers of the Department of Justice may use deadly force when necessary.
Well, that sounds very scary.
It does sound very scary. Now, let's leave aside a few contextual details, such as they alerted the Secret Service that they were coming and Trump was not in Mar-a-Lago at the time. Trump was not in the state of Florida at the time.
They arranged for him to not be there. Which wasn't even a coincidence.
Which would make assassinating him at Mar-a-Lago a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
Would you be surprised to know that one fairly crucial word was omitted from this?
What was that word?
The actual sentence is law enforcement officers of the Department of Justice may use deadly force only when necessary.
Only when necessary.
Not when necessary.
That's a big difference.
Now, the FBI has actually got a lot of pretty strict instructions about what only when necessary means. And part of it is because of an incident that took place at Ruby Ridge, Idaho in 1992 when the FBI shot dead a woman and her son and their dog. Because of some rather loose interpretations of deadly force provisions. So now the FBI has got very strict provisions around deadly force, which includes can't be used solely to prevent the escape of a fleeing suspect. Firearms can't be discharged solely to disable moving vehicles. Verbal warning to submit to authority should be given prior to the use of deadly force. Warning shots aren't permitted outside of the prison context. Officers will be trained in alternative methods and tactics for handling resisting subjects. Deadly force should not be used against persons whose actions are a threat solely to themselves or property, unless an individual poses an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others in close proximity. In other words, that order around the proper use of deadly force is there to prevent officers from using deadly force, not to encourage them to use deadly force. The sort of deep background of this is FBI officers are, by virtue of their job, allowed to use deadly force.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that they have the untrammeled right to use deadly force. If they use it improperly, like against those instructions, they can be prosecuted for it.
Can I ask you a question, though?
Yes.
This would be an official act, wouldn't it? If Biden got Trump assassinated? So,
hey, good point.
Yeah, we don't want to discourage Biden from making bold decisions like assassinating a rival, do we?
Yes.
That's certainly the bullshit argument that we've been hearing in the Supreme Court for the last few months about immunity. But anyway, okay, go on.
Yeah, but anyway, this green light to assassinate President Trump had gone viral before anyone pointed out that exactly the same language was used in the same order or for the raid on Biden's garage.
Yes. I should say that wording that was in both of them is literally word for word just the standard policy.
Yes.
Which you can find online. In fact, I'll put it up for you. I'll put it in the homework. If you want to have a look, it's right there in the homework. It's word for word what's in the document. So go on.
Yeah. So obviously this is just another when I say just another conspiracy theory, this one's a little bit more serious than some of the other ones out there, basically. And, once again, there's a lot of leaps that you have to make. You've got to think that it's Biden directly, ordering the FBI to potentially assassinate Trump, even though he wasn't there. They knew he wasn't going to be there. They alerted the Secret Service before. I mean, it's one of these things you think maybe this isn't even worth responding to because it's so transparently ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the problem is this is the kind of point where people start doing the appeal to heaven.
Yes.
So this government is so tyrannical that other people need to act in self-defense.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of language of self-defense around recently. A lot of the immediate reactions to the Trump guilty verdict were people like Doug Collins in Georgia saying, well, now red state prosecutors and attorney generals need to get busy. We need to fight fire with fire. When you are so deep into this ideology of victimhood, where your entire sense of identity is one of victimhood, then you're always under attack and anything that you can do will be justifiable. And this is a reasonably dangerous escalation of that.
Yeah, it certainly is. There is one thing which you didn't mention, which I think is worth mentioning, which is there is, like you said, this is not the only incidence of the right being worked up about some kind of paranoid deep state sort of fever dream.
Yes.
What a lot of them have in common is a woman called Julie Kelly.
Yes.
And she was the one who started it.
Yeah.
The lawyer, Trump's lawyer was the one who started it.
Yeah.
But she was the one who quoted Trump's lawyer.
Yep.
And I'll just introduce her for those who haven't heard of her.
Yep.
She's the independent reporter for Real Clear Investigations. and she's into legal documents. I don't know if she's a lawyer. She doesn't seem to understand them when she reads them, but she'll often take a sentence here or there and blow them out of all proportion to make huge, unlikely calls. Like, for instance, she was convinced that the photos, the photos in the Mar-a-Lago raid with the coloured folders, she was convinced that they were faked up.
Right,
because of a line in the report that she saw. Not that they arranged the documents; they obviously arranged the documents, but she thought they actually made up the color sheets as well. She just misinterpreted basic English in the docs. She's also a big fan of the idea that the feds were responsible for January 6th. She's the one who put that forward from looking at docs as well. And there were some feds there, but there weren't hundreds or thousands of them. Another great example of her work is she made something out of the fact that actually it was in this. She wrote in her thread, "Oh my God, armed FBI agents were preparing to confront Trump and even engage Secret Service if necessary." Gestapo, she wrote. That's what she wrote, right, as a tweet. What they wrote that prompted that was FBI, EM, and OSCs will be prepared to engage with POTUS and USSS security team. As in the FBI and the Raiders are prepared to talk to the First Lady and Secret Service security team, not shoot at them.
No.
But that's how Julie Kelly interpreted it.
We've got to remember, this is all about the recovery of documents, which Team Trump insisted they'd been completely cooperative about the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Even though he committed all kinds of obstruction. And so she's not a very intelligent panic merchant, essentially. But to the Twitter right, she's Yoda.
Yes.
Right? They do treat her with a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Okay. And she's the one that started this off. And then Mike Cernovich jumped on with the FBI raid was designed to provoke a response. This was an assassination attempt on President Trump. Then MTG jumped on with the tweet you read out. And then Trump jumped on and went on. And then Bannon jumped on and Ronnie Jackson jumped on and went on from there.
He wasn't even there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
He wasn't even there.
You would think he would know that.
They told him that the raid was going to take place so that he didn't have to be there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
At,
just the most amazing assassination attempt
and
ever.
I should say as well, all the conservative legal people
Yes.
were like going, this is bullshit, guys.
Yeah.
Like Andrew McCarthy, who's once again, they all respect when he was kicking the shit out of Biden.
Yes.
He was saying, guys, this is nothing.
Yeah.
And they were just ignoring him.
Mm-hmm.
Like even legal bloggers were saying this is like right-wing legal bloggers were going, this is garbage.
Yeah.
And they said, but they also I want to raise the really bad faith defenses.
Yep.
Like Dan Bongino was a good one. He's an ex-Secret Service guy.
Yes.
He absolutely would have known what was happening with this.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is what he said. He said, this is absolutely a big deal. Don't buy the bullshit otherwise. It was not a standard op. The Mar-a-Lago raid was an unprecedented action with significant potential for confusion and blue-on-blue issues and conflict. It also involved competing equities between federal agencies with equal statutory claims to interrupt the other's activities. Anyone telling you otherwise is either dumb or plain dumb. I've done more deconfliction with Russians in a foreign op. I've done more. Sorry, this is confusing.
Yeah.
I've done more deconfliction with Russians in a foreign op than I did for the USSS. I did for the USS. I did for the Secret Service than the FBI did in their search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. Only a dumbass. They weren't even there. Only a dumbass would pitch it's the standard paperwork line. Go serve a search warrant at the White House in the cocaine case while filling out your standard paperwork. See how that works out for you. Wake up. So he's confusing.
I love the fantasy that there'll be blue-on-blue issues.
Yes.
That there'll be members of competing law enforcement branches having deadly shootouts with each other because someone's come to remove some boxes of documents.
Well,
which at the time, do you remember what Trump's legal team was saying at the time?
What was that?
This is like an overdue library book scenario.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
And it won't be blue on blue because at least the FBI weren't wearing blue.
No.
Because one of their precautions was they came in normal clothes.
Yes,
They didn't want to scare anybody.
Yeah.
And so anyway, sorry, what he's doing there is he's confusing the unusualness of a raid of an ex-president with the unusualness of deadly force instructions. Deadly force instructions, not unusual.
No.
But he's pretending. Like he's been tricky with his words to confuse his
audience of morons.
Audience. Anyway, Chuckles was very scared when he was listening to Dan Bongino. But no, I totally agree with you as well. This is about creating a useful story for MAGA, essentially, to make Joe Biden look like a danger for democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said on Play America, literally within a day, they were running ads about this.
Yes.
And Trump was running fundraiser emails saying, they were authorized to shoot me. I nearly escaped death, which doesn't even make sense. But
I nearly escaped death.
Yes. I know. That's why I read it out. It's pretty good, isn't it? Like, there's a lot of
Just
dumb.
remember that no one is below the law.
There is so much dumb to go around. There really is. Anyway, but there's one more thing I'll say, and that is what they were trying to hide during this.
Yes,
because we should cite this. We've had fun with the dumb bit.
Yes,
There were other
Yes.
sealed documents that were unsealed.
Yes,
and some of them were a little bit more serious.
Yes,
Like the one where Trump's attorneys found classified documents in his bedroom 4 months after the FBI raid.
Yes,
And there was an empty folder and another, quote, mostly empty folder marked classified evening summary.
Yes.
They were found when Trump's lawyers searched his properties again.
Yes,
Wonder why they were searching them. They obviously thought they had reason to. The judge wrote, notably, no excuses provided as to how the former president could miss the classified marked documents found in his own bedroom at Mar-a-Lago. And Hal, who was the judge in DC, also noted that Trump aide connected to his Save America PAC had acknowledged scanning the contents of the box that contained the classified materials in 2021 and storing them on a personal laptop provided by the PAC, which is all kinds of illegal. And bonus obstruction, the doc also says that Trump's lawyer informed him in a June 2022 call that the government had issued a subpoena seeking surveillance footage at Mar-a-Lago, and then Trump allegedly ensured they'd avoid the cameras when moving boxes. There's not many details here, but Hal said, quote, the government has provided sufficient evidence to demonstrate that the June 24, 2022 phone call may have furthered the former president's efforts to obstruct the government's investigation. So there you go. I haven't been called yet by the editor. See, normally this would be when
there were a couple of pieces of correspondence that I wanted to deal with.
Please.
Yes. So one was, you sent these to me earlier this week.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I forgot.
Yes. So this is from Jim Dice.
Yep.
The appeal to heaven flag was flown by elements in the crowd on January 6th, as we've noted. Dutch Sheets and other new apostolic Reformation leaders met with Trump days before January 6th. A number of NAR groups had registered protests on January 6th. On the day, NAR adherents were waging spiritual warfare, appealing to heaven to stop the steal. NAR incorporates the Seven Mountain Mandate, which outlines an active strategy on how to bring about Christian dominion over all aspects of society. Alito flying the appeal to heaven flag seems to be one hell of a dog whistle, with so many other politicians aligning with NAR, that is, again, New Apostolic Reformation, Mike Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. It seems Christian nationalism is a thing in the current political environment. So how close, in your opinion, is America to becoming a theocracy? Okay,
that's the answer.
That's a very good question. First thing I'm going to do is we've got a very useful link to an article by L. Hardy.
Yep.
From the New Republic a couple of years ago in the reading, just for information about exactly what this new apostolic reformation is. I wouldn't call it an organisation. It's more of a sort of network of people who really emphasise the prophetic dimensions of Pentecostal Christianity and the the idea of spiritual warfare, this constant battle between good and evil. And yes, there is a definite program around this is how to comprehensively take over all aspects of society. And yes, there are some pretty powerful people within conservatism who've latched onto this, along with Charlie Kirk. Now, okay, so then the question but
by the way, I'm imagining Charlie Kirk when I'm doing the Chuckles voice. Yeah, go on.
But the question then, so how close to America is becoming a theocracy? My answer would be not very close for a couple of reasons. One is that, as Elle points out in this article, this is an inherently fractious movement, right? So this is a movement of people who don't want to recognize that it is a movement, so they don't have any sense of shared solidarity. It's basically a bunch of religious entrepreneurs constantly out-entrepreneuring each other. And Elle points out that there have been these moments where basically the floodgates got opened to people who were positing these completely incredible prophecies. Now, prophecy in itself, obviously not everyone's going to find it credible, but there are more and less credible versions of prophecy. And currently it's being flooded by garbage prophecy, which is one of the ways in which this movement might kind of tear itself apart or lose steam. But the second thing is, when you look at what actual theocracy is, a friend of mine, a professor at UTS, John Rees, he's made the point, and I agree with him. He doesn't like the term theocracy because that implies direct rule of God. It's never direct rule of God. It's what we usually call theocracies will be better known as clerical oligarchies. Okay, so in other words, you actually have these clerical people in charge who are making the rules based on their interpretations from God. So something like the supreme leadership of Iran, for example. Now, the reason why I think that's a long way off in the US is because the entrenched right-wing interests in the US are really actually pretty indifferent to religion, hostile to it in some circumstances. They're certainly not giving up power to it that way.
Yeah.
They'll be happy to go along with it if imposing a religiously conservative vision on American society furthers their aims, then they'll do it. But they're not actually handing over power to people who believe that they're getting their instructions from God. I think the best possible example of this is Trump. When we talk about who's Trump going to choose as his vice president, as we say constantly, it's got to be somebody who is not going to hog the spotlight too much, is not too much of a star in their own right, is certainly not more powerful than him, is not someone that people will turn to if Trump fails and says, well, maybe this guy will do a better job. Who does all of those things that I've just said describe? God. There's no way he's letting God on the stage with him, okay? He is happy to exploit Christians, right, but he's not having God as his vice president.
So God, not getting on the ticket.
Let alone as someone who's above him. Now, this might seem like a flippant answer to the question, but the term theocracy does get thrown around with a lot of imprecision. You can have a government that imposes religiously conservative rules on people without it being a theocracy, without it being anywhere near a theocracy. And in the United States, social conservatism, Christianity is only one branch of it. I'd say a lot of it is actually macho patriarchy is a big element of it. Traditional homophobia and racism are big elements of it as well that often have something to do with religion but often don't. So I would say it's like the New Apostolic Reformation is worth keeping its eye on. And they would love to imagine that one day they actually will take over all elements of American society. But when you look at the right as a total, they're one element of it, and they're not the most powerful element of it.
That's a good answer.
Okay. Second thing is, this also comes back to something I was saying earlier. This is from Catastrophical Pencil.
Yep.
I have a question for Dr. Dave, secretly hoping for a brief Planet Britain section next week. Does he think the recent announcement by Rishi Sunak of plans to reintroduce national service in the UK is a sign of the the evolving dominance of the new right in the world's traditional parties? If so, what can we expect the Anglophone world from future governments? No, I would actually interpret this as part of the great giving up of Rishi Sunak. This is the kind of policy you put forward when you think it might save a few seats, not a policy that you think is going to win elections. National service, it's important to note this isn't some really right-wing idea, and I certainly wouldn't call it a new right idea. When you look at leaders that you'd associate with the new right, I can't think of any of them who've actually made conscription as part of their platform. So especially the proposal from Sunak, the idea is it would be a choice between a year of military training or 1 weekend a month of some kind of community service, like 1 day of 1 weekend a month of some kind of community service. And they've said the vast majority of people would be doing that 1 weekend a day. The military training thing is actually designed to address a shortfall in military recruitment in the US. So they want there's something like 32,000 people below where they need to be. And I think the idea is they would use that to make up that, but they wouldn't be going any further than that. But if you look at countries that actually have national service, it's not like you look at these and you think, oh, yeah, because these are really right-wing authoritarian places. Like, you know, Germany had it until recently. France had it until not that long ago. Like, Finland's got it now. Norway and Sweden have had it, social democratic countries. It's not a particularly right-wing idea. In the US, it was Richard Nixon who disbanded the draft. And the result of that, someone like Andrew Bacevich would argue, was that it actually created a more militaristic society because it removed the consequences of going to war from most of the population. I would say this is not a particularly new right idea. There's a classic Yes Minister clip, which we'll put in the homework, because this is an idea that floats around quite a bit when people break the glass on, how about national service as an idea. This clip is actually a fantastic little primer about social desirability bias and question order bias in survey research. And it's an absolute classic. And not surprisingly, when Rishi Sunak mentioned this, this was what everyone was talking about in the UK, not the actual merits of this proposal, which are not likely to go anywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Biden supports national service as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, still amazing we haven't been called. I don't know what's going on here. But,
oh, dear.
But I'm going to...
you got something?
Can I do one more thing?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll do this quicker than I was going to do it.
Okay.
Just because I'm just conscious of the time.
Sure.
And that is, I read an incredibly good Vox article this week and explained a lot of the things that... It's a theory, just a theory, but explained a lot of the things that we kick around. I thought, man, this is good. I'm gonna put it in the homework so you can read it, but I'm just going to summarize it for you right now because I think it's fantastic.
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm referring to the fact that even though with the polling, yes, there is, there's polling error and stuff. Like, for instance, right as of this week, the 538 averages had Trump plus 1.1 in Wisconsin, Trump plus 0.1 in Michigan, and Trump plus 1.8 in Pennsylvania. But if the 2022 polling errors were replicated, that would be Biden 1.2 in Wisconsin, Biden 5.7 in Michigan, and Biden 3.6 in Pennsylvania. But so that's fine. But basically what we're seeing is, leaving that aside, is we're seeing that Biden is only a point behind where he was in 2020 amongst white voters.
Yep.
And they're still 70% of the electorate.
Yes.
And he's up.
More in those states,
and more in those states. And he's up amongst over 65s.
Yes.
Than he was in 2020. But he's so far below on young voters and Hispanics and blacks that he's losing out. So it's a very specific voter who he's losing out on. And we also have established that those who follow more closely the election more closely are more likely to support Biden.
Yes.
Those who are more likely to vote are more likely to support Biden.
Those who voted in 2020 are more likely to vote for Biden. Yep.
Totally, yep. Okay, so that's the background for this article. All right, it's by Eric Levitz. Eric Levitz. And his theory is that voters with low levels of trust are shifting rightward.
Yep.
Now, why does he say that? Well, originally, people with low levels of trust were in both parties, like, say, the 9/11 inside job guys were on the Democrats. He said Donald Trump campaigned as an outsider in 2016 who would take on a rigged system and drain the swamp. Trump also redefined the GOP as having a contempt for the system as it existed. He also promoted a shitload of conspiracy theories. At the same time, first Hillary and then Biden rallied to defend the system, defend norms, defend institutions, right? Hillary's campaign was explicitly stronger together, a slogan about high social trust.
Then
Biden continued the trend, saying, remember his favourite phrase? America was already great.
Yes.
Once again, defending the system as it exists, right? And so they further drove the low-trusting individuals towards Republicans. And, of course, this was all exacerbated by COVID and the lockdowns and the mandates. So before long, people with high levels of social trust and confidence in the political system were largely Democratic, and those with low levels of social trust and confidence in the political system were Republican. Now, that would also explain the shy Trumper vote in the past.
Yes.
Obviously, people with low trust aren't responding to polls.
That's right.
All right. Now, guess which groups tend to have lower levels of social trust?
Young people, African Americans,
and Hispanics.
And Latinos. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
2019 Pew poll amongst voters under 30, just 11% were rated high trusters by Pew. 48% were rated low trusters. Amongst senior citizens, it was 37% were high trusters and 19% were low trusters. 44% of black voters and 46% of Hispanic voters were low trusters, like the kids, compared to 31% of white voters. Now, apparently, those racial results are not consistent. They go up and down. For instance, apparently, non-white voters had higher trust than white voters during the Obama era. But generally speaking, they are lower trusting. Okay. And the lowest trusters of all are the people with a low propensity to vote.
Yes.
So this basically describes all of Biden's peak groups. The polling confirms this. If you ask whether the American political system needs no change, minor changes, major changes, or to be torn down entirely, Trump supporters are nearly twice as likely as Biden supporters to pick torn down entirely. 49% of Trump voters agreed with the statement, trained experts are generally too biased to be reliable, but only 20% of Biden supporters said the same thing. So, once again, lack of trust of Trump supporters. But why is Biden losing more low-trust voters now against the same guys he competed against in 2020? Shouldn't it be the same as 2020? Well, Eric Levitz's theory is the trend's been going for 4 more years, so that helps, it accelerates. Biden's now the incumbent, so he's even more representative of the system and the status quo. He's the one who backed the COVID vaccine mandates, which the low trusters aren't big fans of, and Eric Levitz cites Morning Consult, saying following the rollout of the vaccine mandates, Biden's approval of black voters fell by 5 points, while his disapproval rose by 7, just across the the vaccine mandate announcements. And amongst unvaccinated black voters, his approval fell by 17 points. A Dutch study has found inflation is associated with declining trust in the government. The more people struggle with rising prices, the more their trust falls. Hey, guess which groups have been most affected by inflation? Like cost of living issues, the young and the minorities as well. Also, the last 4 years has seen mainstream news organisations losing more influence and being supplanted by alt media and dodgy podcasts like this one right here, like Chuckles' podcast. And you'll recall that the people with the lowest regard for Biden are those who get their news from social media.
Yes.
Remember that? The latest New York Times swing state poll has Biden leading RFK Jr. by 23 points amongst registered voters, but amongst those who primarily get their news from social media, Biden's leading RFK by 2 points. And Levitt has some thoughts that could contradict this theory. He says young and non-white 2020 voters are still favouring Democratic House and Senate candidates. They've just gone off Biden, which is a good point. I'm glad he mentioned that. So could Biden just be weak? Maybe. Although he does point out in previous realignments, they started at the presidential level and then they percolated downwards. And he cites in particular the Southern realignment, which took 30 years to percolate from the presidential level down to House seats and Senate seats. But if this is all true, this could be worse than you think, because who is less likely to take surveys but people little trust?
Yes,
which means
exactly.
Biden's numbers will be worse than you think.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's his theory. What do you reckon about that theory?
I think that there is, first of all, potentially a lot to that theory. It's going to be hard to work out whether it's right until after the election, but I can certainly see that it might be right. If it is right, then one of the worrying things for Biden is that there's not actually a lot that he can do about it.
No.
He's not going to, he's not going to try to transform himself into an anti-establishment figure, and if he did, no one would find it convincing. And the fact that he's close to Trump is because of his pro-establishment credentials. So it's very difficult, very tricky. The best thing that they can hope for is that the low-trust voters actually stay home, or that Kennedy siphons them off from Trump. But there's not a lot that Biden himself can do about that problem.
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking what you said then, that if this is right, it would suggest Kennedy will eventually be a problem for Trump.
Yes, yeah.
Because they're dipping into the same pool.
They are.
One last thought, which is a very short thought.
Yeah.
Just a random thought. There's nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Nevada.
Yes.
You know how polling's been so bad for Biden in Nevada?
Yeah.
Unrelated to what I just talked about. I was reading the other day about how there was a 2018 ballot initiative in Nevada that automatically registers Nevadans to vote.
Oh, okay, right.
And it's been slowly changing the Nevada electorate ever since. Like now, as of May the 1st, the state's 668,000 non-partisan voters outnumbered both Democrats and Republicans.
Right, yeah. That's
And so is it 668 non-partisan, 602 Democrats, 570 Republicans.
Yes, yeah.
And what that means is there's all these low propensity voters sloshing around in Nevada that maybe they are diluting the polls, and maybe they're not going to vote.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're more likely to vote now because they're registered than they would have otherwise.
Yes, yeah.
Even though they're less likely to vote than the high propensity voters.
Yep.
In which case, the Democrats may have lost themselves Nevada for a generation.
They may have done.
Through trying to pursue good government reforms, automatic voter registration.
Yes. So, the margin is currently on average 6.2%. Trump in Nevada.
So we'll see what happens. But if Nevada is
although there are actually some polls that haven't been that bad for Biden.
We'll keep on following. But But if Nevada ends up being a bigger gap than people than you have expected over the years, that may be the reason why.
Okay, it's been a very long day.
Yeah.
It's been longer for you than it has been for me because I did actually sleep last night.
I think I just got my fourth win though.
Yeah. I missed the verdict itself this morning because I was busy feeding my cat Hehe. Which was just a more important thing to do but fortunately my friend and Pepper, Ben, texted me the verdict, guilty, about 30 seconds before Craig Rucastle called me to talk about it. So at least I knew what the verdict was.
That is fortunate.
At the time. But Hecker got fed. Yeah. That's the important thing.
I caught it because I got a news alert on my phone that it was coming. And, and I watched it on Fox.
Yeah.
Which was definitely the place to watch it. There was a lot of salt. There there was a lot of sort of sniffling and flushed, shocked-looking people saying things like, "Well done! Now you've lost the 2024 election. Now you've done it. We're gonna come back stronger than ever." There's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's I'm not saying look. I'm not crowing here. I'm not saying that. I mean, I think he's going to get. I think he's going to win on appeal. I've said that a number of times.
Yeah.
And actually, to be honest, that's actually the thing I'm most like. Even though I'd probably prefer, for America's sake, that Trump doesn't win the election.
Yes, yeah.
I'm genuinely concerned about where they go.
Yeah.
If Biden wins the election in a close one.
Yes, yeah.
Which if he wins, it would be.
Yes.
And then Trump wins the appeal.
Yeah.
And they go, well, hang on, you only won that election because of your bullshit case that got thrown out on appeal. Like, that will be a bad time for America if that happens.
It'll also be Trump 2028.
Yeah, probably. Anyway,
yep.
We don't need to linger anymore on this chat. We've been here long enough. It has been a long day. It's been a long pep, and I thank you very much for taking part, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you for shimmying up like this. Look
yes.
For those who are listening, and I love you all, but you really should at least just flick over to YouTube or Facebook for a second, just for a second. Just see how schmick Dr. Dave looks. You'll never see him looking like this again. He definitely dressed up for TV. You didn't dress up like this when you came on our show.
Yeah, that's not your show's brand.
That's true.
I didn't want to try to imitate John Barron.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah,
yeah.
He is irreplaceable, that's true. Thanks, Dave.
My pleasure.
Thanks, folks. See you next week. Stay peppy.
Stay peppy.